Budget Committee is coming to order here. And we'll go ahead and start with some introductions, starting with Wilda. Excuse me.
Thank you. Wilda Park, City Councilor.
Angel Falconer, City Councilor.
John Saul, Citizen Chair.
Mark Gamba, Mayor.
Milo Denham, Citizen Member. Shane Adma, City Councilor.
Michael Osborne, Citizen Member.
Lisa Beatty, City Council and Vice Chair.
And though I'm at the dais, I'm not actually on the board, so this is Andover City Manager.
And before we start with the department budget presentations, Haley's going to explain some of the new handouts.
Right, so at your seat, you'll see replacement pages for page 38, which is the demographics. We went through and added references and made sure those were the correct amounts in the demographics. And then we provided through email, and so now we just have a hard copy and update to page 48 with that overview. And then we updated, over here, we provided a replacement page for the city manager budget detail on page 74, and we will explain that when we get to the department overhead. And then lastly, you have a new graphic here, and I think Anne would like to say a few things about that.
So one of the things we've been trying to do is come up with a way to visually say what we're doing and where we're going for the next couple of years. So you have it actually in two different ways. The Milwaukee Tomorrow that's face up has the larger CIP and construction type projects that we're going to be working on through this budget. And then on the back, you actually have City Council's priorities with the projects underneath each of those priorities. And then under my name, we have ongoing priorities, just things that we've been working on for several years that will be either completed or greatly enhanced through the budget. So this was just an easier way to sort of condense all that information from my speech. If you see edits, we're still taking them. We'll put this in the budget book at the end of the year.
Yeah, so if you have edits, we can update it to the final version. Also, as we talked about the parking lot, we're trying to do it on the computer just because we weren't sure logistically how we'd get to the other handwritten things. So if I miss something, let me know and I can add it to the list. And then I think we're going to jump right into budget presentations to keep things moving along unless the chair has something else.
Sounds good. So planning.
Thank you. I'm Denny Agner, Planning Director. You might wonder, why is planning first? Because it's the best department. Sweet. No, I have a development, design and landmark committee meeting to go to like at 6:15, so I need to, you guys can't hold me up past that, okay? And I won't talk for more than half an hour, so good there. But I am using my time. I am using my time up. So the planning department. Who are we? Planning director. I'm the planning director, and we've got 4 full-time planners that I work with. David Leviton is a senior planner. We've got Brett Kelver, who's a associate planner. Vera Colias is an associate planner, and Mary Heberling is a assistant planner. So it's a good team. We've also been able to each year include a student intern, part-time student intern. And for those of you that have met or worked with Jen Davidson during our comp plan process, she's pretty amazing too. So we've been really great in getting PSU students to help out. So what do we do in planning? We do a couple things. We do development review and we do long-range planning. The development review work mostly involves administering the zoning code, administering subdivision code and sign code. Long-range work is policy updates, plan updates, and coordination with other agencies. So our time between long range and current planning is generally split at about a 50-50 split. David and Mary are working a lot on the comp plan, and Vera and Brett end up doing a lot of current planning and other special projects depending on what's going on. I think, when development review picks up, we tend to slow down some of the long-range planning work, I think, and that's kind of the trade-off that happens, or the flex that we've got in the department. And we've had a lot of development review happening in the last couple of years. The other thing that we do is we provide some support to the community development group, Alma's economic development group. David's been doing a lot of housing work supporting her, and Vera at times has done different projects such as the parklet program and the wayfinding signage work. In response, community development also provides us support. Besides the overall department administration of community development, we're part of community development. They provide an administrative, at least one administrative support person. Alicia Martin is assigned to us primarily, but we get support from the other admin people as well. The budget message, or the budget description narrative for planning includes some of the accomplishments that we've had in the past year. I think the highlight there is the adoption of the community vision. This was an award-winning project. We got an award from the Oregon chapter of the American Planning Association for our public involvement effort, and we did a pretty amazing job of kind of involving folks, I thought. We've had lots of development activity. In the past couple of years, we've approved probably more the projects that include more units, not all built yet, but more units than we have probably in the last 10 years combined since the North Main project was built. So things have picked up here a lot, and we don't see a break, really. There's a number of things right on the horizon that we're going to be having to address. So what's the future bring besides that? We've just started a 2-year effort to update the comp plan. Comp plan hasn't been updated in 25 years, taking a real comprehensive look at it. It's a big effort. We're trying to involve the community to a large extent, much like we did with the vision. We're doing this at the same time while trying to support our current planning efforts and other miscellaneous long-range projects, like trying to keep the development code up to snuff. We're doing some housekeeping cleanup. And why I'm leaving in a few minutes to go over to the Pound House is to work with the Design and Landmarks Committee to review the downtown development standards. So we're in a process there to try to accelerate that. Council members will remember that they've been working on this for actually over a year, and we're finally trying to give them a little bit more horsepower and try to get this completed. So the changes in the budget, I don't think there are a lot of big changes in the budget. We've added some meeting expenses to try to isolate that. We found we're always stealing money from different accounts to cover the meeting expenses that we've got. We've got consulting. The consulting budget is to help do the comp plan. We've basically promised Ann a 2-year process for that, and so there's the vast majority of that work, that effort is to help with consultants, both technical work and meeting facilitation. Those of you that were involved in the community vision, I think we really saw how having a facilitator really helped that process. So we're trying to do the same thing here, where we've got somebody from outside the department that can keep pushing and challenge folks, and without staff getting in the way. I think, that's, if there's any questions that you have about the budget, I'm happy to answer them. We're also trying to provide some additional training for Planning Commission through the process. Planning Commission doesn't get much opportunities for training, and we're trying to make sure we get them adequate training. That wasn't 30 minutes.
Do you want to talk more?
I'm done. I wasn't allocated 30 minutes, believe me. I was reminded that I had 5.
Thanks.
So any questions?
You call out the assisted annexation program as a line item, but
Yeah.
there's not a lot of money there. What's the history on that?
Yeah, we have, when we do annexation, we generally front some of the costs for covering the annexation expense at the metro level. So it's just, it's a place to allocate that expense. That's all.
So, is there much activity in that area?
Yeah. I mean, we can get anywhere from, say, 6 to 10 annexations in a year.
Okay.
And that fee is about $150 at Metro. So it's just it's a small amount, but it gives us an accounting location.
All right. Thank you. As an outcome of the comp plan effort, we may want to think about, as a future project, how we do a more proactive annexation program that would also give us a place in the future to kind of put some money there to actually have an active program. That makes sense.
We take a pretty passive approach to annexation right now.
Okay.
You guys got a lot to cover tonight.
It's not really a question, but I did think, because we're trying to reflect our, goals everywhere, that in your goals and focus for the coming budget period, that I do think your department's going to have some role in Milwaukee Bay Park, and we're going to need a minor modification or major modification to our master plan, so that maybe that needs to be added to your list of goals.
We can definitely do that. That's partly a long-range effort in trying to think about how to do it, but then really it's probably more a development review effort as much as anything, because we've got to put it back through the process, much like the library was. So it was a project of the community, but really for the planning, it comes through the development review process. Okay, I can go try to prep for the other meeting.
Thanks, Denny.
Thank you, Denny.
Thanks.
I'm actually going to, let's see, I'll come up for my two. So the first one is City Council's budget. There were not significant changes, except for we moved the Open Streets program into the city manager's office, since that is where the staff is that's doing the special events planning for the Open Streets event. But otherwise, there were pretty minor modifications.
Are you ready for questions? Is that what you're saying?
I am hanging out for questions.
So if I may, Chair, if I might ask a question. On the broken down budget on page 66, under events, there were a total of 63 in this biennium, and there's only 20 in the books. So something was moved somewhere or something happened. Can you, other than just that one,
I believe at least 50,000 was related to the open streets of past years.
Okay.
Parkways.
So that's where,
it was Sunday Parkways,
Sunday
which is now Open
Parkways,
Streets.
Open Streets, whatever we're calling it right now. Cool. Okay. That's all I had.
So just curious, since we're not actually employees, what is the employee benefits line? Taxes?
Yep.
Oh.
That's a benefit.
De minimis taxes.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm also up here for the city attorney one. If you guys want to go to that. It's a relatively brief budget, in part because we're not sure who we're going to hire. So our goal here was to have enough money to pay what we expect will be the salary as well as the benefits package. We then included $50,000 each year for overflow with an additional subcontractor. So what this does not include our HR attorney. This does not include our prosecutor. This is only for things that would be specific to the functions, daily functions of city government. But depending on who we hire, we may use more or less of that, and we would have to come back with a supplemental based on use and demand.
And the prosecutor and the is under the court?
Municipal
Correct.
court.
It's under the court for its budget?
Yeah.
And the HR is under HR?
It's in HR.
Okay.
Okay. At least it gives us a good placeholder.
Yeah, and it's a start. Until the person is here, I don't feel comfortable making a determination on any of the decisions they're going to make. I think that is within their purview. So this gets us through to the hiring of that individual. We're expecting to do interviews next week with the hope that we would have a start date of July 1. At that point, after 3 or 4 months, we should have a pretty good sense of how much they're able to handle of the workflow in-house and how much would need to be brought in from a subcontract. Right now, Jordan Ramus is that subcontract. But again, that's a contract that will serve the attorney, so that will be their long-term decision on how they'd like to manage that contract.
Question.
Sure.
Administrative services, somebody that provides, like, runs copies, does, whatever, that kind of thing. Is part of that person's salary allocated in here, or is it all under the city manager's?
I retain the full city under the full city managers because the individual will be reporting to me. And again, it really depends on the individual attorney. Some attorneys are looking for a lot of assistance. Some of them are looking for help with their schedule. It really depends on what the expectations are from the individual, and we're going to have to tackle that later. But we already had Christina, and when we created her position, it was with the expectation that she could provide service to me, the assistant city manager, and the city attorney.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And then I'm actually going to step away for the city manager's budget because someone else is going to present it. Hold on one moment.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kelly Brooks. I'm the Assistant City Manager. I'm new to a couple of you, I think. So I am just going to walk quickly through the City Manager budget, which Ann just touched on. So our budget this biennium is $2,139,000, which is $138,000 less than our 2018 biennial budget. The personnel services budget did change somewhat. It is $65,000 higher. That funds 5 FTE. So that's Ann, the city manager, me, the assistant city manager. That position was reclassified before I took it, which is part of that increase. Public affairs specialist, our community program coordinator, and the administrative specialist, which is who Ann was just speaking about, Christina. Our materials and services budget this go around is $507,000. That's $203,000 less than the 2018 biennial budget. And that reduction in costs can really be attributed to a few key things. One, there was a major contract with the Good Company to help do the climate action plan. That was a one-time thing and not continuing into the next biennium. We are also no longer funding out of the city budget the geese mitigation work at Milwaukee Bay Park. NCPRD is doing that. And we also did have some expenses, and we'll have some ongoing expenses for Elk Rock that will be slightly lower in future bienniums and will come out of Public Works, but that was a cost that we had as a part of 2018. So I did get a question on the increase in the advertising and publicity budgets and the events budget. So I want to touch on that real quickly because those two categories did go up. The one thing that really led to that is there was a contractual services line item. You'll notice that that's been zeroed out. And that was just me looking at contractual service and professional services seem to be duplicative. So there was some redistribution of ongoing costs under contractual services that made other categories go up. We did, as was mentioned earlier, also increase the events budget to reflect the fact that the $40,000 that would have come out of the city council budget was now in the city manager's budget for that event. We also we did do an increase in some of our signature event budgets just to reflect the cost. We have seen increasing attendance, which is great. Solstice event in particular saw a lot more folks in attendance, so there was a slight uptick in those. And when referring to that, that's our Arbor Day, Earth Day celebration, our volunteer appreciation dinner, the Solstice, and the Umbrella Parade. Those are sort of what I call the signature ones that we host. In addition to those kind of key items, you'll see that were some changes in the table that you all have in front of you. They were minor. Nothing changed about the totals. All the totals that I gave you remain the same. It was just reallocating funds across categories. Frankly, after I got the question about, hey, why is your events budget and your advertising budget high, it made me go back and look and realize that some of those elements actually were in the wrong category, so I moved them around to be more accurate. So that is what the red numbers on the form that got passed out today. But I do just want to emphasize nothing about the totals changed. It was just a reallocation among categories. So with that, I think I'll actually just open it up for any questions that you might have.
So may I ask, where did the county tourism funds go to then? Are they in city managers now, or?
That's a great question. So the way we're treating the county tourism funds, they were showing up as $40,000. That's the total of them in the past. And they never really came into us. It was a pass-through. So I'm not reflecting them in the budget. It doesn't mean that the county tourism funds go away. They're still there. If they're applied to any city projects, that'll be reflected in those budgets.
Great.
But it just was kind of confusing to have it just sit there and be a pass-through. So.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Makes good sense.
Anything else?
So the report with the red numbers is the newer?
Yeah, the one you have in front of you tonight with the red numbers is the revised. And final, I promise I'm not changing it anymore, report.
Oh, you can change it.
I mean, unless I'm told to. But yeah, thank you for Haley for working with me on that. I appreciate it.
I have a question. Why on the Public Arts Fund, why do we front load it just the 1 year? And there's probably obvious answer. You've maybe told me before. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No.
So that actually, the total is allocated to the library project for the art installation there. So it was seed funded by the council after the last budget during the biennium. It was a supplemental item, and it has been allocated fully to the library project.
Okay.
All right, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, are we or aren't we doing something around murals anymore? And if so, where in the budget does that fall?
So there was 10,000, I believe, that was not used. I think there was 10,000 allocated in each year of the last biennium, and we maintained the 10,000, and I believe that is in the city council budget. It's the one they didn't spend, but we did not increase it. We just left the 10,000 that they would not have been allocated before and hadn't spent.
City council budget is where it had been in the past.
Right.
And does that mean it still exists out there to be spent, or that means
yes,
it's
we
lost?
rebudgeted the 10 that they did not spend, but we did not increase the allocation
So
in
we,
the city.
so we don't have
council
any
budget.
kind of an ongoing.
We do not
mural.
currently have an ongoing line item for that.
What's the line item for that? I mean, where does that under
That's within the city council events line.
events? Oh, okay. Okay.
So that's why in the first year they have the 15 in that line. So 10 of that 15 is the 10 of murals that hadn't been spent.
Sorry, wait. I'm having.
On page 66.
Page 66, the events line for 2017.
For 2019.
For 2019, okay.
Is where you get that 10 that wasn't spent in the previous biennium. So we're projecting to spend 63 of 73, so 10 of that rolls into the next budget.
Got it.
It's
Okay.
pre-budgeted.
Okay.
And actually, Mayor, just to add to that, we did have a conversation with ArtMob about whether or not they wanted to make a request of council and the budget committee for additional funding. I don't believe we've received that request, but they may be coming in and doing a verbal request to you during this meeting or the next meeting.
Thanks.
My name is Gary Ribello. I'm the Human Resources Director for the city. The HR department provides full range of human resources services for all of our employees, as listed on the page there. The staff is 2 people. It's myself and Julie Light. I think it's been 2 staff for quite some time, and Julie and I have been there for the last 5 years. Budget is holding fairly flat. Just a couple comments. In this last year, we put a lot of work into our 457 deferred retirement plan, and that was a year-long project. And so we consolidated from 3 record keepers down to 1. We went out to bid for that project and ended up in fees and expenses saving about $50,000 a year of employee expenses. We also initiated our workforce engagement survey with employees, and that's provided us a baseline going forward. We'll do another workforce engagement survey this year and kind of see if we're moving in the right direction on those indicators. We've kind of doubled down this year on training, leadership development, professional training, management training. We've did an all-employee diversity harassment training, and we did a manager training with Basic Rights Oregon on gender training. For the upcoming year, we've got 2 labor contracts that we're bargaining. The good news is we've already concluded the police contract, so that's been ratified by the union and will be ratified shortly, hopefully, by council. We're right in the middle of labor bargaining for our AFSCME contract. And I think I'll kind of leave it at there if there's any questions on either activities or the budget.
How much did you say you saved by going from 3 administrators to 1?
That's about $50,000. That's what the employees were spending. That wasn't city savings. That's we managed by getting much lower rates from the record keepers and the investment fees.
So it provided benefit to the employees?
Yep.
Do we give awards for that?
Give a lot of kudos, which we've been doing a lot of to Gary over this one. It's been a big deal.
It was a huge project.
It was a huge project, and it was a way for the city to give more to our employees without actually spending more. And it's a great way to get people to save. So we really liked working with ICMARC. They're our new vendor provider, and Gary really nailed this one.
Yeah. And they've done a great job. I think we increased services. They spend a lot more time with our employees and advising them and going over their investments. I think practically every employee's met with ICMARC advisors, and so it was just a win-win-win all the way around. We've got about a little over $8 million in the plan, and it just didn't make sense to divide that $8 million over 3 record keepers, and we were getting some of the fees were kind of ridiculous, and so when we put it out to bid, it made a huge difference.
And the training, each department has, I mean, you have a line for training, but yep. Each department has training in their own.
Yeah, I don't budget, I don't do the training for skills training. So if it's specific to the department, they own that training. So I'm really looking at training that's more applicable on a broader scale. So management training, professional development, harassment, diversity, those kind of things.
That line does benefit more than just the HR employees.
Oh, yeah, that's going across. And so, yeah, we have partnerships with Learning Point, Inc., which is a company in Vancouver that does a lot of leadership and professional training. And we have a partnership with Kinetic Technology Solutions in Lake Oswego. So, like for Learning Point, we buy an annual pass that's about $5,000, and that gives us 1 seat at every single class they do all year. And then with Kinetics, we buy vouchers at a discounted rate. And then when an employee wants to sign up for Microsoft or an Adobe class, then we use our vouchers. And I'm funding that.
Is there a line item for the city attorney because we do outside counsel for labor and employment?
Yep.
Okay.
And that kind of bounces around a little bit. So this year we're doing 2 contracts, so it'll be a little bit heavier. Next year I won't have any contracts next year because we have a 2-year contract with police and a 3-year contract with AFSCME. So there's either 1, 2, or 0, right, depending on what the year is.
Okay.
And I mean, I guess we don't know yet whether we'll need outside counsel for other employment-related legal issues.
We do occasionally. And sometimes we use an outside investigator if we need to do, if an issue comes up. And I have a different person who does the investigations at a much lower rate than a labor attorney. Yeah.
All right.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Gary.
Silence your phone.
I'm good. Best practices, yes. So for this, are they just taking comment tonight? They're not emotioning it, right? Okay, do you want me to hand this out? Or do you want me to leave it for later? Okay. Hello. Hey. My name is Scott Stoffer. I'm the city recorder, and I'm here to present and take questions on the budget for the Office of the City Recorder. It's pretty straightforward. We have 3 FTE in our department, and it consists of myself and 2 administrative folks, administrative specialists 2, and a web and record specialist, Amy Ashenburner and Hannah Wells. We have 3 primary functions. We support the City Council and the administration in meeting public meeting laws and public records laws, and general administrative support there. And then we are also the records managers for the city. We administer the city's electronic records management system, known as HPRM or TRIM, which we've had in place for almost a decade. And we administer the public records request process and ensure that transparency is met through that process and meet the new state guidelines that were put in place by the legislature last year for records requests. And we're also, my office is also in charge of coordinating municipal elections in Oregon County. The counties administer elections, but at the city level, the city elections officer coordinates the elections, and this is an election year. So that hat I wear only every other year usually, but we're in election year, so that's one of our other functions. So we spelled out some of our accomplishments the last year. Just some of the highlights: we converted from Granicus for recording and broadcasting public meetings and going to YouTube, which saved the city about $22,000 out of the IT budget, going from a proprietary software to really using the platform that everyone expects a video to be on, and it's free. So that was pretty handy, and had great support from our audiovisual folks at Willamette Falls Media Center in helping us get that going. We've also, our office took over from the city manager's office, administering our boards, committee, and commission recruitment and appointment process. We help monitor and track that. So that's something that Amy Ashenburner and I took over. Half of Hannah Wells' time is with the city manager's office, the web part, and she was extremely involved in the new website that rolled out last year. So that kept her busy in the last biennium. And then we've also administered special council projects that have come up. In particular, the last year, we finished a 3-year Vietnam 50th anniversary commemoration dedication, which was a council-directed initiative from back in 2013. So we wrapped that up, and we are proud to continue working with our partners at the Milwaukee Historical Society, the American Legion, and the Daughters of the American Revolution in promoting city history and various different projects. So that's what we do. We're a general fund service office. We love what we do. And our budget is pretty boring, but there are 2 things that I'll note. 2 years ago, we had 4 FTE. And at that time, we had a city recorder who was wrapping up her 32-year career here at the city, and we knew that there'd be some changes. So since then, Pat Duvall is retired, and I've been lucky enough to replace her. And we are down to 3.0 FTE in our budget, in our department, and we're clipping along just fine. So you'll see in our salary part that the budget goes down for that. We also made adjustments to our professional development budgets accordingly for that, as well as our dues and subscriptions budgets were also curtailed to reflect that we have 3 instead of 4. So that's pretty straightforward. The other big change As I mentioned, we have an electronic records management system. It's called HPRM, and it's a pretty unique public-private partnership that we participate in. About a decade ago, my predecessor, Pat, led us into this program with the State Archives, which runs the HP Records Manager software, and it's administered by the State Archives, and there's a number of different agencies that participate in it. And we were one of the people on the ground floor on it, and it's been a great success. No system is perfect, but we've implemented it across the city, and we continue to add things to it every day. It's got a public portal, so we publish records to it all the time, and you can go into our website and find the digital archives and search all kinds of records. So that's been a part of our budget for a decade now, and for a couple of reasons, in the last biennium, the decision was made to reduce the line item for that service that we pay for, and that's been an incredibly stable service for cost for as long as we've had that in our budget, and so they cut it out. There will come a time in the future when we can reduce that monthly fee, when that partnership with the State Archives gets enough other agencies and government entities in. As a pilot agency, we'll see a cost savings. Our monthly rate will go down. We haven't hit that yet. There's a number of factors involved in that, but we haven't hit that yet. So the reality is we're still paying the same amount we've always paid. So while on the one hand, our budget is, we have cut down in the salaried FTEs, we're also asking for a slight increase, which is actually more or less a restoration of the line there on the ERMIS archiving line. You could see in years past it was 34, but in the last 2 years it had been cut back to I think about 8,000, like 22 a year.
The budget was
24
for the biennium.
So it was cut to 24. So I'm asking to restore that because I don't see that amount being from the state. I don't see our cost savings and the monthly fee coming down anytime soon. But at the same time, it's a very stable line item. So that's the story for us. Yeah. There's other things that fluctuate from year to year in our budget. One thing I'm keeping an eye on is with the comp plan review, that means there'll be significant changes to our code. And changes to our code means that my office will have to pay for changes to our code that's published online, and that costs money. So it's a good thing to do comp plan reviews, but it does, at least keeping track of what those changes are, it'll cost my office money to have that republished twice a year. So I'm not asking for more money on that front now, but we're waiting to see how that pans out. If it comes out, it trickles, it's still more manageable, but if there's a lot of changes at once, that's going to be a pretty hefty bill to update our code online and in print. So other than that, we're pretty straightforward. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So I have a question and a comment.
Yes.
So talking about the searching the archives online, yes. Is that just going up to the little search thing and searching, or do you need to do something special to go into archives?
Good question. On the top right corner of our website, I think it says useful links or more info. Underneath that, I think the top one is digital archives.
Okay.
And you want to click on digital archives, and that'll take you to a landing page that it'll say start searching now, or across the top it says search. We have some pre-populated searches that people want to find council packets or resolutions, ordinances. You can just click on those links and it takes you right to that newest stuff. But if you want to do keyword searches, you just click on search and that takes you to the HPRM site. So it's not just from our homepage. There's a couple of clicks you have to get to it.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay, great. I'm going to try to test that. I've searched from the homepage, but I never I didn't think I was searching archives, so.
And actually, just to clarify, so it's under useful links, and then you get to helpful links, and under helpful links, it says digital archives.
Digital archives.
Okay. And the other comment I wanted to just say is the conversion to YouTube from Granicus not only saved us money, but it's way more user-friendly. It's way more, as somebody who watches the videos from home of the Planning Commission and stuff, it's way more reliable and user-friendly than the Granicus was, so that was a great move.
Being a creature of habit, I was a little intimidated by that conversion, but once we were over, I don't know why we waited so long. I mean, we saved money. And another thing that we're watching with the finance office and Willamette Falls with REBA and finance is there may be or there may have recently been an FCC ruling about closed captioning. And so that's something that may trickle down to local governments as well, and may have to be compliant with that. And the great thing is that for any video shorter than 3 hours, YouTube automatically closed captions it.
Really?
Within hours.
Wow.
Yeah. So another free, I mean, at the moment, YouTube is being nice and they're aware of governments using their channel, their stuff, and they, of course, they love that. So, but yeah, YouTube has been great.
On the YouTube versus Granicus, is Granicus still up at all?
Granicus, the videos, when I've spot checked it occasionally for different reasons, they are still up. We have no contract with them, and their language in that contract was a little vague as to how long they would keep our videos up. So there was some 6-month language in it that they would or would not be able to. I don't know. It looks like the whole archive from going back to 2008 is still there, but I can't guarantee how long that'll be there. We are required by law to retain meeting videos for a year after the minutes have been adopted. The written minutes are the official record of the meeting. And once the minutes are adopted, you're required to keep if you have a video for a year. So we retain, we always get we have triplicate copies of our videos. We now have it on YouTube. It's stored on hard drives here in our AV room, and then we're always given a disc from our AV folks. So we have 3 copies. The hard drive, I think, is not monitored as much, but we keep the disc for 13 months after, so a year plus a month after the meeting to make sure that we get that year after the minutes are approved. And then they're on YouTube, too, as a convenience copy. So to my knowledge, Granicus videos are still available. We have backups at least for a year. We can always guarantee we have a year. We're almost at a year. The first meeting in July of 2017 was our first YouTube meeting. And so we're getting close to having a whole year of archived videos on there as well. So.
And does YouTube have the same feature that Granicus had where you could click on an agenda item and go straight to it? Okay.
It's the trick with YouTube is you have to, they're under the video, they're under the video, and you have to click show more. It doesn't automatically have them up there, but the morning after, our staff goes in and we put timestamps on all the agenda. So they're there. And
use that, yeah.
You have to click show more to get to it, but yeah.
Thank you.
The real improvement was the video quality. We had terrible problems with Granicus not playing on different browsers. Every browser has a different video player, Explorer, Firefox, Chrome, and they don't always like each other. So I can highly recommend using, of course, if you're watching YouTube, Chrome is going to be the most compatible because that's Google. But Firefox seems to be just fine as well. Explorer sometimes doesn't like live videos of YouTube meetings, but...
So we don't have, or we may not have the older meetings, and at some point they may just disappear.
At some point, going back, we went back to 2016 when we made the conversion because we didn't know what they were going to do. We don't know if the day after we stopped paying them, they were going to shut off the service. So we caught more than what we were required to keep by law. So we have those. But as of right now, yeah, they're still out there.
Okay.
I don't know what Granicus's incentive to keep them or to not keep them is, but yeah.
Okay.
And the trouble with videos is, it's just in the ether sort of, but they take up a lot of hard drive space. So, an impulse of me wanting to save everything as an archivist is to go back and get all those, but that takes a lot of space. So, gotta be waiting now.
Right. But I can think of some high profile or contentious things for where we may want them down the road. So, yeah, it's interesting.
We'll always have the minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, that doesn't always capture the mood.
No. No, luckily it's
Thank you, Scott.
Benefit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I am Tim Salyers. I'm the Code Compliance Coordinator for the City of Milwaukee, and this is Captain Luke Straight, my direct supervisor. I'm here to talk about the code enforcement budget. The budget consists of 1.5 FTEs, myself is a full-time code enforcement officer, and the half-time is a parking enforcement officer that handles the downtown parking enforcement. Our number one goal in code enforcement is to try to get compliance before citation, and we're in charge of making sure that 20,000 people may follow the code. Some of the accomplishments this last couple of years, we did 2 abatements, which is when I tried the compliance process, didn't work, so we had to get a warrant and clean up the property ourselves with contractors. And then if they don't pay the fine, then we lien the property, or pay the abatement costs, we lien the property. From a parking enforcement standpoint, we purchased a new ticket writing machine, which doesn't allow us, or doesn't require us to chalk tires anymore. We had a device previously. We've kind of gone through a couple. This latest one is by far the best we've ever had, and it electronically tracks license plates and the valve stems, and that's how we chalk tires, is by looking at the valve stem. And we can enforce the block rule, which helps employees have the motivation to move, so they don't get tickets and they have to move a little bit farther than one spot over just to get rid of the chalk mark.
So, I'm sorry, just a clarifying question. If you're tracking license plates, what does the valve stem matter?
The valve stem kind of shows, it's a 6 o'clock, like a tire.
Oh.
The valve stem is a clock. And we chalk it at 6 o'clock, the valve stem at 6 o'clock, parked in this block.
Okay.
We also take a picture of the item, or of the car. And between that, the valve stem, and the GPS, actually, there's a GPS locate also. And so we can, when we come back to it 2 hours later, if it moved, we know, and we know where it was before, and if they violate the block rule, then if the valve stems change, then we know that they moved, but did they move enough? So after we also hired a new employee. We had Ashton Johnson, who was with us. She was with us for a couple of years, and we hired John Simkovic this last December, and he's been great. We're very excited and very lucky to have him. And we also, with the parking permit, or with the parking handheld, we were able to bring in the parking permit system. There was a software that came with the handheld that at no extra cost, and so the tracking of the parking permits and the ability to sell them online came in-house. That has saved us some money because they're given a sticker with a barcode, and it's just a window cling instead of having to produce paper passes and hand them out every month. So we've seen some cost savings because we only had to buy a big, decent stack of stickers instead of a whole bunch of paper permits. So we saw some reduction in cost there. That's kind of it for parking enforcement. The code enforcement stuff hasn't really changed in the last few years as far as the number of cases, and we are anticipating the SAFE program being a part at my involvement in the SAFE program at some point. Don't know exactly how that's going to map out right now. Probably a last ditch effort to get people into compliance is probably my role, and that'll be handled mostly by the engineering department. Other than that, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer any.
I have a question for you. First of all, I appreciate that you work very hard for compliance before we go any further. But on occasion, we do have to do abatement proceedings. And I'm wondering, since we generally, that I'm aware of, don't actually then go through a lien foreclosure process, is your office just losing money when you have to abate? Or do we have it budgeted, but we just don't get it back?
We actually do put liens on properties.
I know we put liens on the properties, but we don't actually enforce those liens. And I'm not suggesting that we do, but from a budgetary standpoint, that money is just sitting, the money that we've expended on those abatements is just the lien.
Budget revenue from those liens. So we are budgeting an expense without the offset. We do lien the property, so if it was to sell, we would collect on it. But at this point, we have not done further proceedings as in to go as far as foreclosure to collect on those.
Okay.
So we don't consider it a revenue stream.
Okay. Thanks.
I have a question, comment. It's been mentioned by a few citizens that we may be getting to the point where we need traffic enforcement full-time instead of half-time.
Parking enforcement?
Parking enforcement, thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry, parking enforcement. So I wondered what your opinion is on that and your vision. Do you think that's coming within the next year or two or after that?
Well, I know that there's recent, we're doing the parking study. It'll be interesting to see how those numbers shake out and what kind of need the parking study shows. Code enforcement will always take more money from the budget. I don't think anybody's going to turn away money if you give it to us. It's certainly possible to hang on to a person if he's being employed full-time instead of a half-time.
Yeah.
It's entirely up to the parking study and the council's direction. This budget reflects a half-time employee.
Mm-hmm.
Did the prior parking enforcement person who left, did she leave for a full-time job? Was that her reason for leaving?
She went to do school.
Okay, so it
she's
didn't
getting her
have to do
master's
with
in,
it. She wanted to.
You'd make more money cutting hair than.
Pardon?
She could make more money cutting hair than giving tickets.
Well, yeah, we've had one or two business owners come in to specifically commend the parking enforcement and ask for more.
Yes.
And I will tell you, walking through Milwaukee Bay Park and seeing the boat parking problems we're having right now, I feel like we need a full-time parking enforcement, and we need one who's here sometimes on the weekends.
Weekends are, yeah.
So I hope that parking study supports that. I'll be very interested to see how that plays out. But the boat parking is getting out of hand on the weekends. So,
real quick, what transpired between FY15 and 17 for the parking citations? FY15 it was at 162 and then went over 1,200 and then flatline. Now we're expecting approximately 900.
So there was a good stretch there where we didn't have a parking enforcement officer. Mm-hmm. And then when we hired Ashton, people had gotten
used to not paying,
lazy, perhaps. And Ashton was very good at writing tickets. And yeah.
Enough said. Thanks.
Now they're getting smarter. So. Yeah.
So as a financial balancing, the amount of money that between the cost of doing our parking system, the permit system, and then the parking enforcement, and then the cost of parking enforcement, where does all that kind of balance out?
Good question. I've done that from a court to total fine perspective, but I haven't done it from a parking perspective. Although we may actually have done it in our parking analysis that we present tomorrow. On the spot, Bonnie prepared that, so I don't know if she wants to speak to it or if we have to say we have to come back to it tomorrow. Yeah, we don't have it with us. So we did do a parking analysis, which will speak to that better. We will go into that more depth through the master fee presentation, but we don't have that ready here.
We do have a project accounting for parking, so that, the different funds that parking get involved in, it will show as a project accounting item. Okay. That's it.
Thanks very much, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good job, Luke.
Good evening. I'm Steve Bartol. I'm the police chief for the city of Milwaukee. If you look at our budget and compare it to the last couple of years, you'll notice there's not a whole lot of change. It's pretty status quo. The one interesting thing that we've done this year is we used to have 3 budgets, one for admin, which included the captains and myself, one for support services, and then one for field services, which is the patrol division. Each one of them had their little line items of office supplies or professional services or whatever. And to us, in talking over the last year, it just didn't make a lot of sense to have them completely divided. So what we've done is just collapsed them all into one budget, and we've taken added money in some places and taken away in others. But basically just folded all 3 budgets into one so that we had a little more latitude to use it the way we needed to. For example, our evidence technician would occasionally be called out to assist with either a search warrant or a crime scene or something like that. And she, to help with collection of evidence and security of evidence, she was in the support services budget. So we had a very little amount of overtime in that particular budget because of its records management. Not very often do we have to pay overtime for them to stay. But what would happen is it's just a few call outs and she would completely eat up that budget. So it didn't make sense to have her on that side of the house. This gives us the ability to kind of go back and forth with what we need and adjust as we need to accordingly. You'll see that the training budget for the second half of the biennium is elevated by about $18,000 from what we normally ask. And that is to account for hopefully sending another sergeant to the Southern Police Institute's leadership course. As you recall, we had a supplemental budget this last go around. You guys were gracious enough to give us the money to send Captain Straight, who attended that and graduated and then was promoted to captain. We currently have another sergeant that's over there right now who graduates on Thursday of this week. We're going to go back and participate in the graduation ceremonies. So we've really focused on the last 2 years on succession planning and career development of bringing up future leaders in the organization. As you guys know, we have several people in the sergeant level, captain level, and myself that are all becoming eligible for retirement in the next couple of years. And as a result of that, we want to be really diligent about bringing up this next generation of leaders. So you'll notice that's in there as well. Do you want to say anything about the school, or?
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to formally say how much I appreciate the opportunity to go to it. I know that I went under a special budget, and I realize that's quite a bit of money, and it's unusual. We don't often send people to programs that are 3 months out of state. So I very much appreciated the opportunity. I know that for me it was quite an experience. I know that I took a lot away from it, and it was very unique. I've been in police work for 23 years, and I've never done anything like that. We'll send people to a couple months to the police academy within the state, and that's normal. And the rest of the training we do is mostly in-house or 1 to 3 days at a time within the state generally. And this was drastically different. That is, as you know, it was a 12-week program. Like 480 hours accredited, and it's part of the University of Louisville's criminal justice program. The instructors there are people that have worked within police work for 30 years or 20 years, and they many of them have their PhD, and they've literally devoted their entire life to both working within police work and then also being critically involved in the leadership training. And that's what that program focuses on, is trying to make a difference and impact nationally on the type of leaders that we're putting in key positions all across the country. So for me, it was very unique because there were just under 50 students there from all across the country, and class participation was a huge part of the program. So you're there with a staff of instructors that have a tremendous amount of experience and training, and also 50 students from all across the country with a wide variety of experience, from agencies as small as 5 or 10 officers to agencies with 1,500 officers. And we would every day, all week long, be roundtabling the issues that are current in law enforcement today, both from the technical standpoint of what we do in the business, as well as obviously the ethical issues that we deal with every day and often read or see on the news. and they definitely challenge the students there to step up, to challenge the status quo within their organizations, and obviously to also be able to make hard decisions that they feel good about later, and to do a better job of leading and mentoring the people that they work with and identifying future leaders and paving the way for the future of that organization. So it was a very unique experience for me. I appreciate it. I think it would be important for our agency to take advantage of that in the future.
So the other thing that's of interest on the budget there is, once again, this year we've asked for $150,000 per biennium for police vehicles. That's the same as we budgeted last go around. As you guys are aware, we've talked about those vehicles should be replaced around 86,000 miles. And currently, of our patrol vehicles, we have 2 that are in excess of 80. We have 3 more that are in excess of 90, and we have 3 that are in excess of 100,000. So we're still playing catch up from those years that we didn't do a lot of replacement, and we hope to get that kind of caught up a little bit. Now, overall, the fleet, 37% of it's at 86,000 or higher, and 21% of that is over 100,000. So we still have a little bit of work to do on the fleet aspect of things. Other than that, personnel services are about the only other thing that's gone up, and that's related to all the issues that you guys are well aware of. So other than that, it's a pretty flat budget.
It is.
Any questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Could you explain what community safety upgrades are? Last biennium, we had
Sure.
1,000. This year, nothing, or this biennium, nothing. And also conviction fees.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So community safety upgrades was related to a fee that was associated to a citation. So if you were convicted, there was an additional fee that was added on to that, and then that was in turn used to do things like buy the speed display signs, and then we turned it back into traffic safety investment. Mm-hmm. There were some statutes that came out that restricted municipalities' abilities to add on fees to convictions in order to just kind of stabilize across the state what it was that cities were charging for conviction fees, and so that you didn't get into a profit type thing, or the perception wasn't that you're doing the citations for revenue, and it was what it was supposed to be, punitive as opposed to adding on to revenue aspects of it. So that went away during that time, but that's where that comes from. And the conviction fee was when we had photo radar, the vendor got a certain fee for every citation that they processed on our behalf. And since we don't,
so now we don't have.
You're right. So, and that's, you guys heard last time, we eliminated one FTE within the department as a result of suspending that photo radar program.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Is the priority one? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Is priority 1 more extreme than priority 2?
Yeah. So your priority 1 calls are your ones that are most threatening to life and safety.
Okay.
So you'll see, what's interesting about that is you guys will see that those calls have gone up over the last couple of years. Priority 1 and priority 2 calls have gone up over the last 2 years, but the overall CAD incidences have gone down. And so what that's telling me is that although we're taking more priority 1 and priority 2 calls, we have less self-initiated activity, meaning we're spending a lot more time dealing with those priority 1 and priority 2 calls. The amount of resources we're throwing at some of these high priority calls, so let's take some, for instance, somebody that is in mental health crisis. They're inside their residence, they're acting out, they're destroying stuff, or they're threatening to commit suicide, or there's something about it that the family is calling us to help intervene in this moment of a mental health crisis. Those calls are taking significant amounts of time to deal with. The amount of resources we use, we deploy the behavioral health unit. We have, like, for example, I was on the way home and listened to one call that the sergeant was running, and he had all 3 of his officers respond with him. They staged, they talked to the family members, they called behavioral health unit, they brought those folks out. They initiated a conversation with the individual that was in crisis in the back of the house, ultimately ended up having to take them physically into custody in order to get them to a hospital. That whole thing takes a significant amount of time. And council's heard me talk about the types of calls that we're dealing with in the past. It used to be when I started, we would deal with somebody in a significant mental health crisis maybe once a month, once every month and a half, 2 months. Now it seems like not as an only every day that we deal with somebody in mental health crisis, it's every shift that we deal with somebody in some form of mental health crisis. Not every one of them is at that extreme, but it's almost every shift that we're dealing with somebody in some type of mental health crisis. And those particular incidents take a lot more resources to deal with properly.
It looks like they might be transposed on the forward years because it's going to take longer to get to a priority 1 call for 18.
Response time, that was my same
response
question.
times?
Yeah, it looks like you're getting...
I will take a look at that and make sure we didn't transpose that one. Response times. All right, well, I'll go back and take a look at that. Yeah, thanks for pointing it out.
In dues and subscriptions, how come there's an increase in 2020?
We just caught that this afternoon. We budgeted, when I projected it, we did 1,000 for each year. I think an extra 0 got on there, and it made it to this document. I was reviewing it this afternoon and found that. So it's actually, we wanted a total of 5 over the biennium, so Haley's fixed that now to reflect 2,000 in 1 year and 3,000 in next year to cover 2,500 each year.
That will actually be a reduction of 8,000 in their budget.
From what it's showing there.
For what it's showing there.
Gosh, that'll pay for your boat to go out and patrol the new island.
No
the city
kidding,
got
right?
for you.
Don't encourage him.
Can that boat have a trolling motor and rod holders?
Yes. And you can't try it out in Montana.
It won't matter. I won't be able to park it at the... That's what Kronberg Park is for.
Yeah, apparently.
Is the decrease in citations from 15 down, is that because of photo radar?
Yeah, that's true. We haven't run, the program's been up and down. We had, when we first initiated the program years ago, we hired a retired officer from Portland to come run the program for us. When he left, we had an officer internally that took the position. He was in the twilight of his career. He retired. We filled it again with another officer that was in the twilight of his career. He worked for it for a little bit and then retired. We advertised it internally. When he retired, not a single officer was interested in sitting in the van and writing citations. Probably 50% of our officers in patrol right now have less than 5 years experience, and I don't think that's really great for the development of an officer who we are trying to mentor in the way we like to do police work, in that community-oriented type policing, to set a young officer into a box to write tickets. We just didn't think that's appropriate to order somebody in there. So we advertised for retired officers again, hoping to get 2 or 3 half-time people to come in and vary the hours. We identified no suitable applicants for the position, and yet we were still paying the $2,000 a month lease fee for it, sitting there empty, not doing anything. And so we kind of made the decision that it was more appropriate to stop the program and try and look at traffic enforcement from a different perspective. As a result, significantly less citations.
One other question. You noted your aging fleet and the fact that you're only going to request 1 vehicle in this biennium. Is that concerning to you?
It's actually, that 150 will give us 3 vehicles per biennium for a total of 6 vehicles altogether over the course of the biennium. So that will help us catch up. We'll continue to replace those ones that are hitting 95 and 100,000 miles over the next 3 years. But I wasn't able to get the average miles per year that we do this afternoon. I was going to, because some of those that are in the 80 are obviously going to climb up here relatively quickly. It'd be nice at some point to do some catch up. But overall, this is a, you know, if you take more money for vehicles here than you've taken it from someplace else, and this is a, you know, we try and balance that between what we need and what the rest of the departments needs as well. So 6 vehicles will help us kind of move in that direction.
Thanks.
There's been a lot of discussion over the prior years about the police radios. Where do we stand on that?
So that is all great news. As you guys know, we were with, our services were provided by the city of Portland. They upgraded. In order to stay with them, we would have had to buy a console that would have gone into dispatch at a cost of around $150,000. At the same time, we were thinking we should be more associated with Clackamas County, not because Portland didn't give us great service, they did, but it was more to partner with the people that we actually work with and communicate with. So over the last year, council gave direction to move to the Clackamas County system. We have purchased, in fact, you guys have on the consent agenda tomorrow to approve the purchase of the portable radios, the handheld radios, and the car radios. They've all been purchased through a large purchase agreement in Clackamas County so that we get the best price, and then they'll bill us for our portion of it. So those radios are purchased. They're sitting in a warehouse waiting to be programmed. And the overall radio system that Clackamas County passed a bond to replace is well on its way to having that full upgrade.
Thank you.
So we're doing good on it. We're on task, and we're on project for the larger C800 project. We're on schedule, and we're on budget.
And it's included in the public safety supplies line. The $98,000 for that purchase that he's talking about is included in the projected amount for fiscal year 18.
That question was specifically for Ron Palmer, who's not with us anymore, but he took an interest in that.
Yeah.
He did, didn't he?
He's a good dude.
And so do I understand the cars are in the line that says contractual services?
No, ma'am. The cars are covered under capital outlay.
The bottom.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
What are vehicle releases?
Vehicle releases are if we impound a vehicle for any reason, say we arrest a driver and the car is required to be towed, or there's an accident scene and we impound the vehicle, or the person's suspended with no insurance and we tow the vehicle, it gets taken to Olson Brothers Towing, but Olson Brothers Towing needs us to tell them who the legal owner is in order to do that. So the person has to come to the office and they show proof of insurance that the vehicle is actually insured to be driven, that they have a licensed driver, and that they are the legal owner of the vehicle. We present them with a document that they take to Olson Brothers Towing and then get their vehicle out. So that vehicle releases that process that we have to go through to verify that the vehicle actually belongs to them before it gets released to them.
How come it doubled between 15 and 17?
A lot more tows.
It wasn't.
Yeah, I don't know exactly why, but that is incident driven. So if we're towing more vehicles and impounding, then we do more of those releases.
You mentioned the change in some of the calls for more service for calls related to mental health crisis. Have you also, I'm wondering about maybe some other changes, I'm really specifically curious about any additional calls to help houseless individuals who might be experiencing.
That is something we deal with on a regular basis. As you guys know, we've introduced you guys to Billy Wells before, and he's kind of the guy that we've identified as the one that is kind of what we call our liaison. He does it as an ancillary duty, but he's really good about getting out into the brush, checking our public park areas and different things like that, meeting with the individuals, trying to direct them towards resources, and then also holding them accountable if their camp is a complete mess and they're destroying the environment or they're in an area they're not supposed to be. He's been really good about working with them to get them to a different location. Some of those folks are receptive to resources and some of them aren't, and so it's just that balancing act of trying to deal with them.
But it's not his full-time role.
It's not his full-time position, no.
Do we keep track of the number of contacts on that?
Not intentionally, no. It'd be interesting to see if we could go back and try and dig that out of CAD, but probably not. If we wanted to start really tracking those numbers, that'd probably be something we'd have to be intentional about, and we haven't done that yet.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm assuming it's rising, but it'd be nice to have actual data that supported that.
Yeah. As you know, H3S does homeless populations every year. They go out and do a census. But as far as the work that Billy does on that, I don't think we've specifically set up a code to track that particular activity.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Chair, I would ask for 5 minutes, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Everybody all right taking a 5-minute break?
Sure.
Yep. Thank you.
Any childcare need?
Child
All right, there you go.
There you go.
Thank you.
We have another question for the chief.
I just had a follow-up question. You mentioned it would be a code to track the calls for help.
That's something we could do if we're interested in tracking that data. So it sounds like maybe we are, so I can talk to my records manager about how we would set that up in our current records management system and or through the CAD system, which is through dispatch.
Okay.
So it may be as simple as Billy just making sure to have it marked in the CAD system as some type of homeless liaison contact or something like that, whatever we want to call it.
Okay.
Then it will give us the ability to track data over the next 2 years and see what happens.
Okay.
And I actually have one follow-up question on that. So when it got really cold, we had officers who were out and had blankets and stuff in their car. They would stop individuals to make sure that they were safe for the night. Steve, would that capture those types of interactions, or would it only be something more in-depth where we were actually looking at charges, or there was something more in depth around the...
If we design a code like that, we can have officers make sure to note that in the CAD when they do those types of contacts. So yeah, we can, if we're really interested in tracking that type of data, we can just work with our staff to make sure that they understand the code when it should be used and then start tracking some numbers over the next biennium.
Okay. So and just because we're giving a little bit of direction to the police department in hopes of getting information back to you next year, is the expectation that you do want those individual moments where we're maybe not dealing with something criminal, but we are dealing with cold spells, heat issues, whatever may be happening that's driving us to have those interactions? Okay.
I do, yeah. What I'm interested in is sort of trying to track some kind of trend on how much homelessness, because the point of time count, well, it's something, it's notoriously inaccurate, and it certainly doesn't boil down to what's happening in Milwaukee. And I'm often asked, and I don't have an answer.
It's not just the population, it's the amount of resources that we're spending to work through some issues with somebody, whether that's because they're, in some kind of crisis that forces some interaction, or because we're self-initiating some activity to try and help a person. That population count that Clackamas County doesn't necessarily capture that activity level.
Yeah.
So I think that's well-founded, a good idea.
Cool. Thank you.
Would it be code enforcement if your team had to disperse a group and then subsequently clean it up? Would that be code enforcement to come in?
Well, there's different resources available for that. If it's on public property in the Parks Department, they have crews that will come and do that. Tim,
so it's their budget?
Huh?
It would be the Parks?
Yes. Budget? Yeah, well, the police department doesn't have a cleanup budget.
But are you talking about sort of like a zombie home situation where we have something that's really degraded, we have individuals who are squatting on the site, we go in and do an enforcement action? Steve, in that case, what happens with the property?
So I'll use a house that was on Harmony Road as an example that we had 3 or 4 years ago. The house became vacant. It was during the time where the banks had tons and tons of inventory and they weren't paying attention to what was going on with the various houses. We had some folks that I wouldn't necessarily call them transient. They were some folks that were without a house at the time, but they were more of a criminal element that kind of moved into this house, squatted, and started participating in some activities that weren't real great for the neighborhood. There was some narcotics sales and different things like that were going out of there. So from the police department side, we had a hard time enforcing the civil action of it. So Tim had recently moved down to the police department, and so we started working with him to figure out what codes we could use. We figured out there was no water to the house. So we did a notification. If you don't have water to a house, it's not safe to live in. And so we ended up using the code enforcement arm of the police department to kind of manage that aspect of it. And then when it came time to write search warrants to get inside to do the inspections, we helped out Tim through that process. We used the building inspector in that process. And then we ended up doing the search warrant. We ended up arresting several people on warrants that were squatting inside the residence. That gave us a little more leverage with the banks to kind of motivate them to take care of it. We ended up boarding up the house so that nobody could get into it. And then over the next year or so, the place sold I believe that we recovered some of our abatement money out of that particular sale. That was one that we had a lien on, and when the house sold, we recovered some of that. But if you go by that house now, it's been cleaned up, it's been flipped, and it looks great. It's got the yard all done, and the fence is up, and it looks good. So it was a success story. We were able to get the bad guys out of the house. So I kind of rambled on. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
That it?
Thanks.
All right. Thanks.
Good evening. I'm Peter Passarelli, the Public Works Director, and this is Damien Farwell, our Fleet and Facilities Supervisor. And Damien's going to provide an overview of our facilities and fleet budgets for you tonight.
Thanks, Peter. Hi. I would say that both the fleet and facilities budgets are relatively consistent with the previous year. Notable items for facilities would include we completed an Amoresco contract, which allows us to control our HVAC system. Believe it or not, we did not have control of the HVAC system. So as a for instance, if we wanted to change the temperature in this room, or if somebody had issue, we'd have to call a contractor. It used to be on a DOS system. We now have that control, so if anybody is uncomfortable tonight,
I was going to say, we have routinely are too cold in this room.
Always freezing in this room.
You have to do a training.
Let us know when, and we can change that.
I am cold tonight.
We can now change that. And that Amoresco contract also, sure, that Amoresco contract also included LED lights almost citywide. And that contract is guaranteed to save us $17,000. If it doesn't, they'll pay us. So the Amoresco contract, we are part of the Strategic Energy Management Program with Energy Trust, which means I go to meetings, we graph and track all the city's utilities. We try to, we replace mechanicals with more efficient ones. We change settings in the HVAC system. It's essentially all to save energy. They calculated $11,000 of energy savings in the last year, and we received $5,000 in incentives based on those energy savings. We're currently under contract to get a professional condition assessment citywide. So I'm not sure if you guys are aware, about 10 years ago, we did a full facilities assessment with a company called Faithful Gould, I believe. And what they do is they run through every city's building. They go through every asset in that building. That could be a water heater. That could be the condition of the stairway. That could be the roof. And they do an exhaustive assessment. Which is really helpful when we come upon CIPs because, well, most recently we looked at that assessment as well as what we knew was going on citywide, and it's really overwhelming. It's like millions and millions of dollars and a lot of deferred maintenance. But we take a condition assessment like this, and it allows us to use somebody who's really professional to help us boil that down to recommend the most important ones for the next years, as well as decrease sort of the surprises mid-year where we say, you know, we didn't have this in the budget, but it's really critical for said building. And just as an aside, the sort of the culture in the facilities department now is that we're really aware of energy consumption. And it doesn't matter if we're replacing a window, a water heater, a roof. We take that into account because we know it's critical for long-term efficiency, as well as we can get incentives through Energy Trust. Any questions?
Are you going to, well, actually, probably a bigger question. Are we going to go through the CIP list as a report, or is we're just going to read it, and then if we have questions, ask questions?
We just hit this.
We hit the summaries at last meeting, so we don't have specific time designated to go through those. We could flip back and go through the facilities ones that are in fleet now during this presentation, or we could add that to the end of the presentations at the end, whatever you prefer. But we don't have time scheduled right now.
Okay, I didn't read through it. I was curious to have a conversation about how badly deferred what was, so that we have some sense going forward of where the cliffs are that are looming.
Do you want us?
But if we want to wait till we have a chance to read what's in here.
Well, he's saying they're doing an assessment this year, right?
Right. I saw a draft last week. It hasn't been delivered on. I'm really comfortable and confident with what we have in the current CIP. If that's any assistance to your.
Okay. Well, yeah.
It'd be nice to walk through that after we go through all the budgets.
Yeah.
Because it's a completely different beast.
Exactly. So we'll probably have questions at the end. I'm going to drag him.
Is a request for you to come back next week.
Great.
Well done with a smile.
I think the mayor's making an excellent point. When we hear like huge backlog of deferred maintenance, then it's like, okay, how do we prioritize which projects we go for first? And you've said something about, energy savings being real important. I think that's consistent with the goal, but maybe we do need to spend more time on it.
Sure. Cool. Should we move on to facilities? Or sorry, to fleet?
Sure.
Again, I think the budget is fairly consistent with previous years. Notables would be, we're taking a closer look at the size of the fleet. The reason for that is, well, it's clearly from a budget standpoint, the average service truck costs a fleet between $5,000 and $8,000 a year. That does not include fuel. That's depreciation, maintenance, licensing, et cetera. So if that vehicle gets, as a for instance, 500 miles a year on it, that's $10 a vehicle mile, which is essentially not appropriate. So we wash through vehicles. We target the ones with the lowest mileage. Those vehicles we essentially try to share so that we get rid of those vehicles or we don't replace them when they come up. Anticipate losing 6 to 8 vehicles. In addition, this year we've tried to deal with a backlog of vehicles and equipment that was not surplus in the past. Right now, we're up to $100,000. We sold $100,000 worth of equipment.
And when he says we, he means he has. It's been amazing to watch. We have had a stockpile of vehicles sitting at Harvey Street for years. And every day I am signing titles as he is selling them one after another. It has been incredible work, and I've really appreciated it.
Thanks, Dan. And there's probably $20,000 to $30,000 more. We also purchased 2 plug-in vehicles. And we look at the purpose of every vehicle and try to replace it with essentially a lighter vehicle, because the lighter vehicle is a lot more efficient. And if we get down to it's no longer a service vehicle requiring tools, it can be replaced with a plug-in, and that's what we did for the 2 existing plug-ins. And we also look at vehicles from a basis of what do we have to replace versus what seems old. We postponed a number of vehicle replacements this year because we consulted with fleet and said these vehicles are running fine. Our city's really small. Our vehicles don't get very many miles a year on them. So a vehicle with 60, 80,000 miles on it typically is not problematic. And that's about it. Any questions on the fleet side?
Yes. Excuse me. What's the outlet to sell the vehicles?
Oh, it's called Gov Deals.
Gov Deals.
You can see it online. It's open to the public. We've gotten really good money for the vehicles that we've sold recently, and it looks like a lot of people see the vehicles, which was the goal.
Okay.
It's a surplus auction service.
So we can go online, we can buy a street sweeper.
We sold our street sweeper, which is shocking with as old as it was and how many problems we had with it, so.
To somebody up in Alaska.
Alaska.
Yeah.
Bought ours.
Yes.
And how are they're taking it up there on a ship?
I don't know.
It's not going to make it on the road.
The Alcan Highway?
So I would be interested in future at some point seeing a breakout on the miles per gallon on fleet broken into 3 categories, sort of the heavy trucks, the machinery, right, as one category, the police vehicles as a category, and then sort of light duty people moving kind of vehicles.
Absolutely, there's a good point there. The heavy vehicles, there is not a lot of current opportunity for a more efficient vehicle. We started reporting a quarterly report that includes all the miles traveled in that quarter as well as the previous year. I omitted, I didn't omit the heaviest vehicles on that. We omitted the police vehicles. I don't have as much to do with the police vehicles, but the heavy vehicles and the personnel vehicles, we report mileage quarterly for both that quarter and the last year in order to make sure that the vehicles are getting enough miles to justify.
And just for a clarification, Damien, in order to meet the mayor's request, would you need to do additional work to figure out the gas calculations within that?
Yes.
So
we could figure that report out.
Okay, so I would just ask that we put it on the parking lot. I think that we probably have the support of the group, but since we haven't used it yet tonight, I figured it was a chance for you guys to vote on something that we're adding to the list.
Awesome.
And in order to deliver on that, we'd want really specific information for what we're looking for out of that report. Because the report is built basically from scratch. So if it's is it year of vehicle? Is it miles per gallon of vehicle? Is it miles traveled last year? Is it, we'd want to know what we're looking for from a granular standpoint.
But each of those items makes the report more and more difficult to create and also to manage. And so that's part of, I think, why Damien's asking for some specifics as to what items you'd like to have included.
And is this clarification, is it information you have now that we would bring back next week, or is it information we would collect prospectively?
I'm not asking for anything now. I'm just, the thought, when you look at, average miles per gallon across the fleet of 7.6 miles a gallon, you wonder if might there be some room for improvement, which obviously you've been doing, and I'm imagining that it's the police cars and the heavy equipment that just sucks that right down, but I'd be curious to see how those break out.
Actually, if I could add to that, Damien and I have actually had some good conversations about that average mile per gallon across the fleet, and specifically on our public works fleet, because we do see on some instances where there's really some low miles per gallon, even on our light duty vehicles, and that may be because some of our staff isn't practicing some of our no idling policies, or a lot of stop and goes and things like that. But we're looking at there's certainly opportunities there to improve the miles per gallon and be much more fuel efficient. It also speaks to making sure that we're using the right vehicle for the job, and sometimes that doesn't happen. So we've talked about those opportunities and are looking for ways to improve that, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to actually start tracking that and included that as one of the performance measures to see where we were headed there. Everything that Damien's been doing on both the fleet and facility side, he's looked at it through that lens of energy efficiency, trying to improve our footprint, our carbon footprint, and what we do internally in facilities and fleets. How does that relate to the climate? So.
Yeah, I really appreciated reading both those reports. It was warmed my heart. Thank you. Excellent job.
Hello, I'm Brandon, Information Technology Manager. We're an internal service group consisting of 3 staff. It's me and Steve Lang and Chris Amick. We support all the technology for all departments across the city. Our budget this year is actually a little bit less than what it was previously. That's due to contractual savings, eliminating contracts that were non-performing, and just consolidating technology into, just consolidating technology versus being so spread out with what we have. Any questions?
I am going to give a little bit of credit just because I can. We're sitting here. This is another place where we had an employee take a lot of his own energy and really find ways to save the city money. And over the last 2 years since I've been here, he's actually invested a huge amount of time and effort. And the savings of them paid for things that we really needed, like a new phone system that we're going to get here in the next month. So I really just want to call out the fact that Brandon has spent so much time trying to figure out a way to make sure we're using the city resources effectively.
Yeah, I was excited to see in the goals for the upcoming year the migration to CES for our internet services.
Yes, for ESD, migrating is definitely, we just had a meeting today to go over some of the items that we need to accomplish with them and get an IGA started.
Which line item reflects that on the budget?
That comes out of our telecommunications, and that's actually one that we're able to be reduced quite a lot, and that was just going through and eliminating services that we no longer need. For example, paying for long distance and 3-way calling on an alarm line. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a quarter a line, and when you have 15, 20 of those lines, it adds up over time. So we just eliminated all of that. If it's an alarm line, all it needs to do is dial out. That's it. We're also going to focus on cybersecurity this year. There is going to be annual training for staff, and that is in the budget. It's an online training that all staff will be able to participate in depending on their job function, and it covers HIPAA, PCI, red flags, and I'm sure there's another one that I'm missing that covers a lot of the requirements for ongoing training for those in technology.
Random question. Is there a reason why you expect the number of laptops supported to drop each year in the next 2 years by 5?
Yes, we're replacing laptops with iPads in a lot of the cases. Laptops are overpowered and they're underutilized. And many of the apps that we are using, many of the applications and many other processes that we have are able to consolidate into an iPad or onto an iPhone, which is one of the many consolidations that we did. We standardized on iPhone over Android, and it's just for ease of support and being able to put it into mobile device management. So if somebody loses it, we can click a button and it gets wiped, and we have no sensitive data out there that's able to be found.
As an example, I went from 3 devices when I got here. I had a desktop, I had a laptop, and I had a Surface, and now I just have a Surface.
Yes, and we've done.
I'm not giving up my laptop.
My laptop better than those Surface.
Yes, so Windows 10 is going to be something that all of our users are going to have to adopt.
Yeah.
The email account supported, is there a reason why it fell so dramatically? I mean, it's not because there's less people or Is it just more efficient, or?
We went through, we moved this past fiscal year from on-premises email to Office 365, which is cloud-based. During that time, we looked at all the email boxes that were out there and were able to eliminate a lot of them. Like we had 3 were just for light rail, and light rail is gone. We've met the record retention.
So it's just efficiency.
Yeah, it's just an efficiency, going through reviewing what we have. Why are we doing this? Why is it out there? And if it's not any use, then get rid of it.
See, I knew we'd had some conversion this year, but I didn't realize it was Office 365. I will tell you that I work for a federal agency in my day job, and we just went through that conversion, and it was way more painful than when you guys put us through it. So whatever you did very well, because it was a big old mess in my agency. It still is, actually.
So, thank you.
Thank you for your savings.
So now you get to hear more from me. We're going to go to, Carla didn't come. She wasn't required to come, but she is our court supervisor. Court is down in the front office under me, and so I gave her the night off, but she said she might come by, so I would have recognized her if she was here. As you know, that you learned last week, due to the lower volume of tickets in the photo radar, we've reduced the FTE allocated to court from 3 to 2.5. Part of that workload has been reallocated within the office for the other offices up front, but you'll see the reduction in cost in this department. Additionally, this is where the city prosecutor funds are. That's the whole, well, it has its own line, so it says city prosecutor. The contractual services herein are for bailiff and other security that is on site during court sessions. And then you have the judge's contract also in this. So it's maintained as flat. You will see a slight reduction in the education and training due to the reduction in FT, and the judge's reimbursement should be going through her contract line and have been factored into that line versus in the education line. Any questions there? Okay.
So the judge is the professional services line?
Correct.
Okay.
So currently we're holding about 2 court sessions a month, and she gets paid per session.
And the city prosecutor makes more money because there's a prep work and stuff involved?
Right, so he gets a flat fee per month. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter how many cases. He does submit semi-annual reports with note how many cases, and he is supposed to average a certain amount, and he's been more than that average since then, but it does factor in all of the work he does outside of the court sessions. This budget also does, we've projected to increase the attendance court to 2 a month based on preliminary discussions with the school district. But again, we will only end up paying whatever we end up scheduling, and those discussions are still happening.
Prosecutor doesn't come into that, does it?
No, that's just for the judge.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, no. Any questions? Okay, so if we move to the finance budget. Here you will see that there was an actual increase of 0.5 FTE, and that relates to the transfer of the EOC responsibilities that have transferred from the PD to finance. And again, as Ann talked about last week, we have a unique opportunity in which we have a staff member on the finance team that has specific experience in emergency operations. I would note that in the bank charges, the significant increase relates to the change in policy that we're proposing on page 28, in which currently we are offsetting a portion of the fees with interest revenue. So in the last 2 bienniums, these numbers are offset down to where we've budgeted, so that we're in line there, and the excess is being recorded as interest. So So it's about $100,000 in 2018 of what we're offsetting there. So that shows the increase, and then we've projected some increases due to increase in volume of transactions. The utility billing services line, previously that was budgeted directly in the utilities, and it wasn't allocated quite evenly. It was across the 4 utilities. So we've consolidated that, and you will see how that's being transferred through the transfer line based on the revenue coming in that is generated by those by the utility bills themselves. So last year, actually, it was budgeted at $117,000 in fiscal year 18. The audit services we have it trending up a little bit because we're going to have to go out for RFP next year. So we're just looking at what the market will be. We won't have a set contract going forward. And in the education line, you'll see a slight increase. It includes that we've had turnover in some major positions, so we try to hold it at about $2,000 a person. And in the past, some of our employees who were at the end of their career hadn't used those funds, and so they had gone down. Now that we have new employees taking on positions, they're going to be just building some of those skill sets, getting connected with other organizations. And we also just went through a conversion of our software system, in which we are hoping to bring in some software experts to help us use the system more efficiently. In the professional services line, the large increase in fiscal year 19 relates to some pass-through funds. About $42,000 of that is pass-through related to the ROAC, which is the organization of multiple cities, which has come together for the audit of the PGE franchise fees. So $42,000 of that, there's actually an uptick on the revenue side to offset that. Any questions here?
So I know you talked about it last week and again tonight, but I'm still not really understanding what's going on with the bank charges. So could you go through that again?
Right. So in our policy currently, so like you'll see how it was 0 in fiscal year 2016. So basically interest revenue, which you've now seen an uptick, was used to offset the fees. And so going forward, I'm proposing that you should actually record the revenue gross and the fees gross, because they're not based on the equivalent services. So the interest revenue is based on your deposits. Those deposits could come from tax revenue, which doesn't have transaction fees like utility billing expenses and other things like that. So the change in policy is that you would be recording both your interest revenue and your bank charges gross, and then you would be allocating the bank charges and utility billing expenses more consistently with how those fees are being generated.
So you would do like interfund transfers?
Yes. So there's actually a utility billing line in the transfer schedule that wasn't here before.
Okay. And so that is fees on
so credit card fees, any that range between 3% and 5%, depending on the type of credit card. It would be the bank charges that would go into that utility billing line. We can specifically tell how the fees are being generated. The ones that won't end up in the allocation are more of like the fees from the local government investment pool. Those are shared overall by all of our departments, so those would be won't be allocated through the utility billing line. They'll just be included in the finance portion of the fees and allocated based on the budget.
Okay.
We saw this a lot in the building department.
Yeah.
So we see an uptick in the number of permits, a lot of people using card to pay them. We were then paying those fees out of finance, and that wasn't necessarily reflective of the rates that were actually, there was no interest generated. She can correct me. There's no interest generated by that department. So we're paying fees without receiving the offset. So what we're trying to do is make sure we're accurately reflecting which departments have interest right now, like the library, versus departments that don't have interest but do have high fees, so that we are making sure that the right departments and funds are paying for those fees.
So when we talk about the credit card fees, give me some sense of quantities of dollars.
So in if you look at the transfer schedule, I think we're projecting actually only about 24,000 in the building department with the uptick. It has doubled year over year. Like it was 5,000 like 2 or 3 years ago, and then it was 10, and now we're projecting with the increase in revenue to go up.
That's just in credit card fees.
Just in credit card fees, yes. And then like utility billing, there's a much larger volume of transactions of your utility bills, and I want to say it's closer to the realm of like $90,000 a year.
So due to the increased volume of these items, you've elected to do a different accounting treatment. The underlying phenomena is basically the same. You're just sending a different cost signal to
So for several years, we weren't earning very much interest because the LGIP was at a very low rate. The economy was down, so we weren't getting very much interest. So it was almost a one-for-one. This came to my attention 2 years ago when our expense line ended up negative because we had more interest than we did of bank charges. So that's when I started looking at it more. And when we looked at the policy, the offset was actually part of the policy. It said interest above what the fees are or whatever, you would allocate out, but before that you would offset. And so again, when I look at how the interest is generated versus how the fees are incurred, they are not a one-for-one, in my opinion. So this is a much more reflective way of allocating the cost to the departments that are generating the cost, and then the interest is allocated based on the deposit balances each month. So then the departments with more money are getting credit for those interest earnings.
Do we charge for use of credit cards? We don't charge anymore. That's where I was going.
Yeah.
Building permits or whatever they're paying for.
We don't incentivize people to pay us with a cashier's check or something.
Or a debit card.
Right. Currently, our policy is that we will just accept credit cards and we don't have any sort of convenient fees. We've talked about this a little bit, and actually the building department is part of what is in your master fee schedule for tomorrow. She's proposing a 5%, I believe, technology fee to offset partially the bank charges and partially an uptick in software and other needs of their department. So she's proposing that as a method to kind of recoup some of this, but there are different means in which you could pass through the convenience charge, or you could have 2 different rates. In building, that's difficult because all of her fees have to go through the state, and so actually the state was the one that recommended she do this technology fee. And again, Sam isn't here tonight, so she'll be here next week and tomorrow to talk more to it, but that is how she's addressing it, but we do not currently address that anywhere else.
So is that just added to a permit fee then, as a line item or part
Correct.
of it?
It's a fee, yeah, that goes on.
And it'll be based on the, it'll be like a percentage? Like a 5%,
I believe it's
not
a
a flat.
percentage of the permit fee, but we can verify that tomorrow when we look at it. Because the credit card charges are generally percent of the charge, but they range, like it's hard to say 3 or 5 because depending on which credit card you use and which, actually we have at least 2 different merchant services provider depending on the platforms, the fees vary.
And Haley, just as a follow-up question, so if somebody does an ongoing monthly fee to pay their utility bill, and they set up something, is there a way for them to set it up outside of a credit card, or do they have to go that route? And is it actually less fees for us if we set it up as being a debit, basically, against the account through the routing system? Do you know?
So Bonnie might know this better than me, but I actually believe we don't allow auto pay to be set up on credit cards, which is why our actual auto pay utilization rate's lower than most. They can go on a one-time basis and use their credit card, but if you were to set up auto pay, I believe you have to use a debit card or a bank account routing number, and that is a much lower fee, if at all.
Okay.
So,
if I might just add to that, I know for my own utility bill, I couldn't put it on my credit card. It comes out of my checking account, but it comes out automatically.
Yes.
So it doesn't get to the answer for tonight, but it sounds like there's significant interest in us coming back to you with some ideas on how we might be able to lower those fees. And there may be ways to do that. I need to do a little research. So if we can punt this till the next meeting.
So would you like on the parking lot?
Mm-hmm.
Bank
charges, fees, do credit card fees versus debit or withdrawals. And we'll have a discussion. We'll come back to you at least with what the complications would be It would be a policy change. It may require different software. It gets a little complicated, so we'll see what we can do.
Any other questions on the finance budget? So we actually have a couple departments within the non-departmental. So first is the non-departmental department. Within here, this is where things that don't get covered anywhere else go. So the dues and subscriptions, that line is solely for our LOC, League of Oregon Cities membership is where we charge that to, and that membership is citywide, so that's why it goes here. Other large ones, the general liability insurance, those are projecting to raise 9.2% based on the preliminary estimates we had when we developed the budget from our insurance provider. This is where the NDA grants are. Those have been maintained at the same level that they've been in past years. And then we have some debt service, the PERS debt, and the special public works loan from the state is in this, paid out of this fund.
So why was there expenses out of the Pioneer Cemetery, but no, there's nothing budgeted again? Is it just a one-off kind of situation?
We actually distributed the entire balance of the endowment this year. That's what we had approved earlier, so we did a supplemental to appropriate the full balance that we had on hand, and we have dispersed it to the cemetery board for them to maintain going forward. So we just got out of that business.
Thank you.
Just for clarity, we do still provide water.
Oh, that's true.
So performance measures. Number of families, accounts receiving financial utility assistance seems exceedingly low given that 12% of our population actually falls below the poverty rate. I assume that every single one of those is in renters and there's nothing.
So those aren't the people who utilize the low income rates. There's about 120 of those. Yeah. I want to say we had that statistic before. These are ones, there's one-time opportunities for either a large leak or something else where they can apply to have a one-time thing waived. And so there's only, and like I said, so there's a line over here, it's like $10,000, $5,000 a year, $10,000 for the biennium is what it looks like there. And so those are just for one-time applications, and there's qualifications that get assessed for that.
I wondered about that too, Mark.
So is there anywhere in here that we see the numbers on the actual utility, low-income utility participation?
We don't have that on here. Like I said, we could get you the stats of how many people utilize the program. And we could probably calculate what the difference is. I don't know how their usage, but we could get some of those stats if that's what you're looking for.
I'm less interested in the amount of money
just the number of households?
Number of households,
okay.
Yeah.
And we actually brought this up when we were talking about the utility rates from CUAB. And right now, if council's interested in having it, it would be a more rigorous discussion than we could do at a budget meeting about whether or not you want to amend that project, that program to try and capture more families. The issue there is those dollars are a part of the CUAB calculations as well. So they come from somewhere. Sure. And that's part of why I'd like to, if you want to go into depth on that discussion, I'd much rather have it on an off-budget cycle, just to have to start that discussion.
We put it on whatever parking lot that requires?
It'll go on a parking lot. I think that's actually called the wait list. But yes, we will put it on the wait list for discussion this year.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions here?
Well, it's just sort of why do we do LOC out of here, but any other membership like that council, because it's predominantly council that utilizes that membership.
We actually, so Denny Egner uses that membership a lot. So that's one of those places. I use that membership a decent amount over the course of the year. Haley.
The LOC is citywide. Like all of the department heads are members. And so that's why they've plugged it here, I believe.
There are a few other places where we have a couple of memberships that I believe I may pay, but Haley can correct me. Things like Rotary. I think that it.
I actually think that we're all paying those, like I'm paying my portion out of my budget, and the chief, whoever has decided, we have 3 staff members who have are part of the corporate membership, and I think we're allocating those costs to our own budgets because we have our own dues and subscription lines. So like my memberships to Oregon Government Finance Officers Association and AICPA and those types of things go into my dues and subscription line, whereas LOC is a membership for all of the city management, and so this is where it's historically been charged.
We did the same, I'm blanking on the name, not ICMA, but the association that we all work with that is more focused on staff across the board for leadership development. They're based out of here. Anyway, in those cases where we have a number of individual staff, we actually Scott is managing that account. And he's
ELGL.
ELGL. And he's going through and collecting dues from each of the department and then making a payment on behalf of the city. So most of the time, except for LOC, we're actually going through and doing individual accounting to a department.
Okay.
So the next department in the non-departmental area is, we've retitled this from public access to PEG, which is the public education and government funds. And so you'll see there was some materials and service lines that have been grayed out. Specifically, it was the Willamette Falls TV. If you actually look forward in, I believe it's this city council budget, the contract for Willamette Falls for putting all of these council meetings, this meeting, planning commission, was being split between these 2 funds. However, we're required to track the actual PEG funds, which are funded through our franchise agreements from Comcast. Those are restricted to capital in this capital line. So we moved all of the operating funds out of this fund or this department so that it solely tracks the restricted funds, which are restricted to capital. I would also note here that in 2019, we have $70,000 budgeted in addition to the 45 that we annually budget for the access centers for the potential relocation of this room in the city hall. If we end up building out the garage bay, we'll have to relocate all of the equipment and build an equipment room down there. So we've designated some funds to have those available for that if needed. Any questions there? And then the last non-departmental department is the debt service fund. So this is where we have our general obligation debt for light rail, library, and Riverfront Park. Well, Riverfront Park is a full faith and credit obligation, and it is actually funded by intergovernmental revenues that are billed to Clackamas County under our intergovernmental agreement with CCSD1. And so they actually reimburse us, so that's the intergovernmental revenue there, and it offsets specifically the Riverfront Park debt, and then the other debt is funded with property taxes that is levied to cover the debt service for that year.
Is this one of those areas where we need to change Riverfront Park to Milwaukee Bay Park?
Yes. Good point.
And what is the debt on Milwaukee Bay Park? I didn't think I thought the last round of improvements were paid for between grants and between the Kellogg Good Neighbor funds. So.
Exactly. So these are what's funded by the Kellogg Good Neighbor. So the intergovernmental revenue from Clackamas County and CCSD1 is the Kellogg Good Neighbor funds that are paying this debt back.
Okay.
So any questions on the non-departmental?
The debt service property taxes, they're going down from this 2-year period to the proposed budget period. I'm just curious, how is that determined?
So it's based on the debt service for the next 2 years. If you look down here, we calculated how much debt service we had on those, and then it's the reverse of what we do on the revenue side. Well, this is revenue, but we predict that we will only collect 94%, and we increase the levy so that the net amount will cover the actual debt service. So we don't want to collect more money than what we have to pay in the current year. So when we levy these taxes, we do it based on a dollar amount, and that dollar amount is calculated based on what the debt service payments are for the year.
So it's just like a 1-for-1.
On
debt service, you say you have this amount of property taxes, and the rest of the property taxes go someplace else? Or?
We actually escalate it, assuming only conservatively a 94% collection rate. So you take your debt service and then you divide it by 94, so it goes up to an amount higher. So the amount you actually collect will be sufficient to pay the debt service.
Okay, all right. You gross it up then?
For the collection rate, yes. So then on the parking lot, would you like me to also add review of CIP items so that I can make sure facilities and fleet comes back? The only other department that won't necessarily be here would be IT. They only have a few, information technology, have a few items, but if you guys have questions on those ones, it would be good to know in advance so we know if he should come after you review it next week. So with that, if we don't have any other questions on the department budgets, we could move to the call for public comment. Or do you guys have other items to add?
Well, I know we got a couple people here that want to comment, so we should probably get to them. Huh?
Okay.
I guess
stealing John's job.
Sorry.
We will now hear public comment on the proposed biennial 2019-2020 budget. Does anyone wish to comment on this matter? And I have two here, so I'm going to call on Elvis Clark, who lives in Ardenwald. He wants to talk about our biennial budget goals.
Hi, Budget Commission members. The two goals, or you have three goals, but the two goals I think are not as high a priority as some of the things that I think are more pressing than the the one global goal of climate change, and the other one regional is housing affordability. But I think it's still the number one pressing item in the city that I find is the neighborhood roads being in disrepair and not being paved for quite a while. And then I think reading through the SAFE program and the SSMP stuff, that many of these neighborhood roads will still be left without new pavement, and that it still is an issue of uneven surfaces, walking on them and bicycling on them. I think that is the number one thing. If you could squeeze out more monies for that, that would be, I think, advantageous to my neighbors and people that I care about most. And or additionally, the police, I think, could use the funding that these two programs might take, or the FTE, or the cost savings from there. And on that note, I do know that when I bicycle around and I'm walking around the neighborhood, and that includes around the public safety building, I am noticing an uptick over the last year myself in the number of amount of speeds that people are driving. I'm wondering if the loss of the photo radar, over time people lose their learned behavior after traffic fines are going down. And so I'm not sure I really would take one FTE away from the traffic policing. Other ideas I had was on the one thing with climate benefit also would be maybe a tree program. This one's a little bit new to, but to give a small incentive, it probably wouldn't be much, and it's a kind of a pilot program probably starting out to give people an incentive to plant their own tree and maintain a new tree. That and that has a lot of benefits besides it has some climate benefit. In my reading, trees are not a home run on the climate thing, but they do provide tangible, certain benefits in the here and now for Milwaukee residents, and that's shade and animal life that goes with the trees, and it also helps absorb the waters in the ground for stormwater stuff. So and I think a lot of people would enjoy having their own hands in an environmental project like that, and planting a tree that they may nurture and bring through life. The last thing is I attend our Art and Noel Neighborhood Association quite a bit on a regular basis, and I know that they've had to kind of turn back a little bit the requests for grants to things like the PTO, the Art and Noel PTO, and also Milwaukee High School has their graduation night stay over, and so they were asked for that too. But we also hold 4 concerts in the park, Art and Noel Park, every year, and so the cost of that has been rising, I guess, and so we're a little bit tight, less for the PTO and these other causes. So those are things with certain tangible benefits to Milwaukee residents, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thomas? Next person is Greg Hamer.
I assume you wanted that up.
Yeah, and can you hit the slideshow for me? It's under view. There you go. Beautiful.
There it is.
Hello, everybody. My name is Greg Hemer, and I'm here with Michelle Hemer, and we are representing Milwaukee Historical Society at 3737 Southeast Adams Street, home of the Milwaukee Museum. Now, most of you already know the great and wonderful things that the Milwaukee Historical Society does for the city, so I'm not going to waste your time, but please go ahead and look through these slides. Most of you are members, and yes, the city of Milwaukee is a member, and we do not charge you a corporate membership because we believe in your value as being part of our organization. So I am here tonight to talk about the inclusion that we put into the 2019-2020 budget cycle for Lots Loop. The question is what is Lots Loop? Lots Loop is simply an interactive walk around Lot Whitcomb's original donation land claim. It is a total of 5.5-mile excursion. The walk covers 6 parks: Island Station, Oak Grove, the Trolley Trail, and Main Street. What the walk does not care about is where you start or where you stop, but where you can just view a significant point in time. It is probably one of the best commercials that the city of Milwaukee has ever produced, and each number stop coincides with the number stop on Milwaukee Museum's website. So each stop around the walk will explain history, ecology, nature, art, businesses, or point of interest that you'll see on each stop. This next slide will show you the kind of things that we are talking about. So for example, Stop F, which is out on Elk Rock Island, talks about the Rock Island Club. Stop 4 is Nature, which is the Kellogg Creek Bridge. It talks about the Coho for Salmon Initiative and what you see out there. Stop 23 will be actually renamed the food cart spot since it's probably no longer referred to as the old Triangle site. But it talks about the food carts that you see there. And then as you see at Stop 24, it actually gives the history and the explanation of that wonderful piece of millstone art that we have there by the train station. So how does the visitor know about Lots Loop? We have planned some brochure sites. We will be putting, we have been allowed to have one at the kiosk, at the new kiosk at the food cart area, Milwaukee City Hall. We are going to be working on the Spring Park entrance, 26 and Sparrow, Kellogg Park, and of course we'll have businesses along the walk and available at the Milwaukee Museum. You'll be able to see it on Milwaukee Museum's website and our other social media platforms. And the key is to have signage located at each stop. Signage to Lots Loop, the sign at each stop. The sign corresponds to each number of the stop. The sign is simple, non-complicated, and explains the purpose. You can either attach it to an existing or new pole in the right-of-way. And each sign has a QR code, so all you got to do is scan it with your phone. For those of you who are as old as I am, it takes a little bit to get used to. For those that are young, know exactly what it is. You scan that thing, and it will take you right to the museum's website to see your stop. Lots Loop today. So how we started this out in 2016. Where are we at today? The stop verbiage is to be live on Milwaukee Museum's website in the late spring. Brochures will be ready about that time in late spring. We have received 3 brochure locations, and we're still working on those other 2. We have received $3,875 in funding to date. We expect more revenue to come on in as soon as that website is exposed, as basically what we do is we do sell ad space onto that website. And the expenditures so far, we've spent money on website, brochure, and map re-enhancement for the website, and that total has come to $1,475. You can see that we have very many partners, both private and public. So we receive funding or in-kind contributions by TriMet, Island Station NDA, Historic Milwaukee NDA, Milwaukee Garden Club, Mount Hood Territory, in loving memory of Krista McDonald, Michael Schmier, Hemer's Helping Hands, and Oak Grove Community Council. We have visited various organizations asking for permission, ideas, and thoughts about Lots Loop. As you can see from the list, Oak Lots History Detectives, Oak Grove Community Council, PARB, DLC, KGNC, DBMA, ISNDA, and MHNDA. See, I've got pretty good at my acronyms over the years. So the question is that why are we coming to you to ask to this be included on the budget? Well, one is we were inspired by Councilor Amba's April 2018 article about being involved inside the public process. And the other thing is that we found out to be able to put a sign in the right of way, the city of Milwaukee has to pay for it, design it, and pretty much has to do everything and that nobody else can do anything except for them. Now, why should this be included? It is because in our 2016 visionary statement, we said a lot of things. And under the People Department, we are engaged and come together in many ways through various events and community gathering places where we can celebrate our interests and passions. Milwaukee is a diverse community that provides opportunities and support for all of its residents through a variety of resources and enriching activities. Under Place, streets are tree-lined, well-lit, and designed to promote a healthy and active lifestyle. Milwaukee collaborates with community partners like Milwaukee Historical Society to create and preserve spaces to inspire the public to be engaged with the city's past and future. And under Planet, Planet, the Willamette waterfront is easily accessed by the public and offers a wide variety of activities and events that can be enjoyed by all. Under Prosperity, downtown Milwaukee is a vibrant destination for both residents and visitors who come throughout the region. The city is nimble and responsive to those needs of residents and businesses with programs and policies that are financially sound, encourage job creation, and help support a strong and resilient local economy. And of course then, super action number 5, cultivate a sense of community, culture, and belonging by encouraging public involvement, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what is the proposed budget? I don't know where it falls in, whose department it falls into or how it falls into it. It could be under city engineer, it could be under public works, could almost be anywhere. I am not the technical expert on that. I'm relying on your abilities to figure that out. We are proposing $44,950 in budget cycle or $22,475 in each biennial year. Now, how did I come up with this? I told you before, nobody actually knows what the design is by city code because it's all decided by the engineer. So I used the best guess estimate, which was $1,450 per sign, and that is based off of the 2017 wayfinding program. We have 31 signs located inside the city limits of the city of Milwaukee. The sign project probably, hopefully, will cost less depending on sign design, placement on current right-of-way poles, and of course, grant funding, partnership funding, or other such activities. You have a copy that was handed out to you at the last meeting. I want to thank you very much for your time, for allowing me to come. I tried to keep it underneath 5 minutes. I may have been actually close. Does anybody have any questions?
I do. Have you, I noticed on, were those lists of sponsors and also folks who have given information to be included in this project, were those lists exhaustive as of today?
Yes, so, yes. The contributions, they have already funded it, and we have made promises mentioned on the website page and in the brochure, and the people that we've reached out, what I would really like to do is do a second reach out, especially with the DLC and the Kellogg Good Neighbor Committee and PARB to talk about what the design of the signs should kind of look like.
And are there organizations that you've reached out to that you have not received a response from?
Actually, no. But we have not reached out to NCPRD yet. We've had quiet conversations. There has been encouragement, but it hasn't gotten to a level of what I would call somebody that is a decision maker to be able to discuss it.
Okay.
May I ask if you...
I'm sorry, one more really quick follow-up. Okay. And so there hasn't been any contact made to the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde?
No, there has not been any contact. We do have what we call as our Native Americans story in one of the stops.
Without information from the tribe itself? Is that, they haven't provided any information?
They have not provided any information. It is information that we already have at the museum or on file.
Okay.
Ellen Chimov has offered information on the Indians. She said she has a big collection of information from when she was a teacher and used it in her classroom, and said she just needs to find it in the garage since she's retired.
And is just, okay, I'd be interested to know if that information came from the tribe.
Yeah, I don't know where it came from.
We'd be happy to reach out to the Grand Ronde tribe. That's not an issue. In fact, I met somebody that actually knows somebody from there, so I have a connection.
May I ask if you've reached out to the North Clackamas Chamber of Commerce, since you're utilizing area in both the unincorporated and the city? Could be that some of the tourism dollars or some of their general funds even, I don't know. So
$1,175 came from the Mountain Hood Territory grant. That did come from the city. That was in 2017 that we were awarded that, right? that gave us the funding. The funds that we have now have gotten us to this point. I would assume that if we can get some sort of decision on the signage, or if it is included in this budget, then we could be able to reach out as partners and be able to get a lot more grant funding, and that would be one of the sources.
Did you have any feedback from PARB or KGNC or DLC?
When we went to DLC, we explained what it was, and we went with a sign design. They wanted a much more complicated sign design, which is what you see presently now. Before, it was just on kind of a brown sign with just some wordage on it. So we've added some pictures, we've added the QR code, and we've added some little bit more design feature to it. Kellogg Good Neighbor Committee, when we went to them, we wanted to make sure that that it was okay that we walked through Kellogg Park and that we could put signs in there, and they were all for it and very excited about it. And PARB heard our presentation, and we didn't ask them to respond either way. But they certainly enjoyed the presentation, and from individual members from PARB, we got excellent feedback.
And have any of those groups actually, have you engaged any of the city boards or city staff in actually review of your text that you're proposing to put up on the website and stuff?
Not at this moment in time, but the way that I see it at this moment, that it is proprietary to Milwaukee Museum, but if that would be something that the city would like to see as an exchange for doing the signs, more than happy to let more people in.
Thanks.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thanks. Thank you, Greg.
Hey, I also want to say thank you for all the hard work. I know it's been a lot of nights and everything else. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else who wants to provide public comment?
Better to be last than not at all. Good evening. My name is John DeHaas, and thank you for giving me this few minutes. My proposal or idea for the budget, or an idea for the budget, is that I have known and I have seen I live in Milwaukee, have for the last 13 years, and been a Clackamas County resident for over 30 years. But I have noticed how the council has gotten bigger and better, as well as our city is growing. And what I'm looking for is hoping that I'm going to go out and start a petition to raise or get funds for city councilmen to get a raise in pay.
And women.
In pay.
No, just the men.
Just everybody. City council people. City council persons. Because I know that you guys all do a hard job and you give a lot of your time, and I think you guys deserve some back. And we are a growing city, and other cities are looking into this also. So I just think we need to keep up as well as the rest. So I was hoping to get your okay to go ahead and start this petition and bring it back to you and show you the people that are interested in possibly giving you guys a raise, because I believe that all the work you do is really, really good job. So any questions or concerns?
So is that a request for, just to really be really clear?
To start the petition.
So are you requesting a line item for the petition process?
No.
So not necessarily a budget item for this?
Well, it will be a budget item. That's what we're hoping for, to be in the budget for the annual or biannual, line item that would give you guys a raise, basically, or cost of living expenses.
I mean, we're at the budget point now, right?
I understand that.
So are you talking about a formal petition to actually put something on a ballot?
Yes.
So that obviously wouldn't happen in this.
No, it won't happen right this second, this cycle. But I wanted to at least start the process and get it going.
I'm not sure the city council has any decision factor as to whether a citizen goes out and tries to initiate a petition. That's not up to us. That's up to you, John.
Okay. Well, as I said, I was going to make you aware that it's going to start going out, and then I'm going to make this happen. So thank you for your time.
It's a nice thought, John. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in.
Good.
We have it all? Is that it on public comment?
Those are all public comments.
When was the last time the stipends changed?
A year ago. Well, the education and training was changed a year ago. I think the stipend was changed in 14, maybe?
Not since I've been on council.
Seems like we had the discussion, but we haven't taken any action on it. I believe it's something the budget committee has to do rather than the council itself, right?
Probably, yeah.
Is that like a parking lot item? Or?
It says, there's a footnote that says monthly stipend, these stipend amounts have not increased for inflation unless otherwise specifically proposed by a budget committee motion.
Are we hearing any overwhelming need to address it now with a motion? Or?
No.
Well, I don't know what we would address, as Councilor Park said. I mean, have at it if you wish, but that's not something that the Budget Committee or City Council would get involved in with respect to a private citizen's petition that I'm aware of.
No, it's sort of two different questions. One is, does the Budget Committee just want to do something or not? And the other one is, a citizen may or may not do a petition to that effect.
And I agree with the sentiment and have often thought that we should be paying the councilors and the mayor, because I start by looking at what I expect them to do on behalf of me as a citizen of Milwaukee. And when I look at all the meetings they attend and all of the council meetings that they attend and what I expect from them, then I back into what's that worth to me. And it's a lot bigger number than what I see them getting their little stipend at this point in time. But I think it's something that needs to be talked about over time. But I'm very much in favor of looking at it and trying to do something.
I was going to say, we had an exchange of, the council had an exchange of information at various points about what other cities do, and we're not really out of line with the comparable cities. So
no, that's true.
Not something I'm inclined to revisit.
That was a fairly incomplete list. There were all kinds of cities that weren't on it that are the same size as us that have completely different systems than ours.
And that's why I commented, I start by looking at what I expect from them, not what other people are doing in their city. I don't care what they're doing. I'm going to look at what I expect from the councilors and the mayor, and then what's that worth to me? Standalone, what do we want to see from our people? And then I come to a much bigger number than what I see in there now.
Well, may I propose that the stipend would at least be at a minimum pegged to inflation on an annual basis?
You mean a percentage on?
Yeah, we all, hopefully, you're retired, right? hopefully at your job or profession, you get an annual.
Social Security does not go up according to the CPI. I can attest to that.
That would appear to me an easy.
I probably live on
item to move forward without. That there's obviously a huge time.
Also, in attracting new people to the council, I think if you guys found some way to offer, or there was some kind of something, not that people were looking for financial gain when they take these jobs, it just offsets their job, because as much time as you folks put into this job, is way over the amount of what you get paid. And if there was at least something that was offered to bring people to keep this line of people and the expertise that we have now is a better way to go than not offering nothing at all or more.
In the spirit of, I just have to say this, I'm sorry. In the spirit of servant leadership, I do what I do, and I've done this kind of work in various formats for over 50 years. And it's to give back to the community more than I would ever get from the community. It's a way of providing volunteer service. Those of you who sit on this committee and other committees of this city put in a tremendous amount of work also in your volunteer service. I think it's great that we get a stipend, and I could see it maybe tied to inflation. We also get all of our education and training and reimbursement for mileage and any meals we have to buy at a meeting and so on and so forth. And so some of that stuff begins to add up. Believe me, you know, if it paid a living wage, it'd be great. I mean, when you live on Social Security, you're always happy to, you know, get anything else. I'm happy that the city provides 3 meals a month for us for dinner, you know. It's kind of nice. And I know the last list we got from LOC was a very short list of just cities they knew of what they were being paid. But when you take even a city like Eugene, that their mayor gets $1,500 annually, not a year, not a month, but annually. You know, or Astoria, that's $100 a month. Happy Valley has nothing. West Lynn does pretty good. You know, they get more than we do, and that's fine. I think it's something that takes a lot of discussion, a lot of looking at, and if we were to, I think there's maybe 2 things we could do, and I certainly have no objection to looking at, like, tying things to CPI. But perhaps one of the things that we can do, there may be other cities that are just as interested in this kind of an issue as we are, because there are a lot of cities where the city council and the mayor, or, you know, all the various parts of that are putting in a lot of work and not getting anything really, you know, any compensation back from it. And some of them probably have to take time off from their work, like I know some of you have to do at times. And I so appreciate that, and I think it's very gracious and it's very wonderful, you know. But so perhaps LOC, if we asked them, LOC would do a more statewide survey to find out, and that would benefit all of the cities throughout the state of Oregon. They could all look at updated comparison numbers. I realize that no city, 2 cities are alike. I understand that. But, you know, everything else we do, we look at comparisons of other cities. There isn't anything we undertake without saying, well, what do they do with this, this, and this? And we find comparable cities. And that's what we want to look at, you know. So we could undertake doing something like that. The other thing that we could do as we have discussion and move further on this is to say, okay, well, let's kind of like maybe do like the county does, have a special salary compensation committee that deals with all the factors and whatever, leaving emotion and everything else out of it, but just dealing with the factors, and then they come back with a recommendation that ultimately the budget committee either adopts or refuse, you know, or doesn't, or whatever. So there are those kinds of things that I think we could do as citizens if this is, you know, if this is a route that we want to continue to explore. I think there are ways we can do that.
Just to add a little comment to Councilor Parks's testimony tonight, I probably in the last 6 months have seen 8 requests for information from different cities asking what are your compensation rates through 3 or 4 different listservs. So I do think that there is a demand for it. I know that LOC recently hired a new director. This may be a good place for him to start some work. I know he's in his hiring process for a couple of positions, and once he's staffed up, he's looking for some good projects.
Yeah, he did tell me that they have one staff person who specifically would have that kind of information, so I'm just going to kind of think that perhaps that staff person could communicate with all the cities and set up some kind of a, you know, matrix of some kind. They could ask 2 or 3 different questions.
I mean, LOC does that in lots of areas, right? They do utility,
exactly,
wastewater rates and water rates.
And we see that in the LOC bulletin all the time of all these cities have responded to this, or this, you know, different survey. Right. So it's something they're used to doing. I mean, that's one point. It's certainly better than us trying to do that and get out to all the cities. But LOC has all that information on getting out to the cities, and they have somebody that's used to doing that type of thing. So we could perhaps formulate 4 queries that we wanted to know. I mean, or more. I don't know. But
Parking lot?
Yeah.
So is it an LOC ask for a compensation? I'm sorry. Are we specifically adding to add back the conversation about council compensation, or are we adding something about talking to LOC?
I would say LOC and also the community conversation. I mean, I think that's, what other cities are doing is one factor. I think, John brings up another, an issue of, whether, we on council, are able to serve on council because of, various reasons. Either we're retired or we have very flexible jobs. There are a lot of people in our community who are not represented by this council necessarily, and they're, a lot of them maybe would like to be able to participate on council, but they don't have the same flexibility in jobs and family situations that we have. So I think it's maybe a bigger conversation than what we're capable of having tonight. And I don't think it's just necessarily 4 questions to LOC. I think it's a bigger conversation with the community.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's actually interesting. I was in a conversation the other night with some people, and it had broadened out even to the state level, talking about what legislators are paid. Our state legislators are paid $25,000 a year, and we expect them to be these professional people that put in more or less full time. They go to meetings, they're doing things all year round, even though we have these short sessions. And they found that intolerable, and so there was a lot of conversation around. They were considering going to the ballot with something that had some kind of, but that was still being explored. So I think it is a much bigger conversation around compensating elected officials for their actual time rather than whatever it is that we currently.
So a couple of things. One, I think the LOC ask is an easy ask tonight. I think that's a parking lot item that I think would be great to get a vote of this committee on this evening. The other item is a waitlist item, i.e. it's going to require a substantial amount of probably my time and possibly others. And actually, if I were to do this, I would ask that John participate in this with me. As the chair of the budget committee to design a program. So I'd also need to talk to him about his time commitments and other things. So I would like to be able to come back to you with when, even in schedules, John and I could have this discussion and how much time it would realistically take, because it is going to take my time.
And you have many other major projects that the
45
council has asked you to work on that you're doing right now.
I counted them today. So yeah, and that's really why we call it a wait list, right, is that I need to know what's coming off of my plate in order to make this proceed. So we will come, John, if you're comfortable, I'd like to talk to you in the next 5 days, and we'll talk about what that process might look like. That'll give me a sense for time. But as the chair, I think it would be a good partnership. Okay. So we've got the LOC ask on for the vote tonight. The wait list has this broader discussion on, and we'll come back to you guys next week.
Haley, at one point you and I had a conversation about breaking my budget out into the various parts, like the travel down to Salem to do essentially lobby work.
Right, so there was a few things I think we looked at. It was the actual stipends, but it was also the education and training dollars, and then the memberships. I think we kind of broke out those 3 pieces based off the top of my head, potentially.
So I'd like to have that available at the next meeting or at the third, however, whenever we want to have that
I
conversation.
can provide it to Ann for her to use with her conversation with John and how they develop the conversation.
Okay.
Does that work for you, John?
Yeah.
So are you wanting a motion on the LOC ask, or are you suggesting?
Yeah, we're going to come back to all 4 tonight,
okay.
just to make sure that we do it in order.
Okay.
If there are no further questions, I will entertain a motion to close the public testimony portion of this session.
So moved. Seconded.
So it's been moved and seconded to close the public public testimony portion of this session. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Looks like that motion carried. Public testimony of the budget session is closed. Public hearing on the state revenue sharing plan is hereby called to order. Does any member of the committee wish to announce any actual or potential conflicts of interest?
No.
Does any member of the audience have any objections to the committee's participation in this hearing? None. Staff will now provide an update on the state revenue sharing plan.
So we are eligible for state shared revenue, and we have forecasted that we will receive $375,000 in fiscal year 2019 and $400,000 in fiscal year 2020. In the current year, we are projecting.
Haley, can you move
You're not on the mic.
Sorry. So I just reviewed that in fiscal year 19, we've projected to receive $275,000 of state shared revenue, and in fiscal year 20, $300,000, and those have been included in the general fund's general revenues for the purposes of the general fund use.
Have we received any additional correspondence on the state revenue sharing plan?
No.
Where is that in our packet?
It's on page 55.
Does anyone wish to speak in support of the state revenue sharing plan?
And that's, well, I don't want to interrupt the script, but I do have some questions.
No one has provided any testimony, so we'll skip here. If there are no further questions, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the revenue sharing plan hearing. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Public testimony of the public hearing on the state revenue sharing plan is hereby closed. Now we're on to the parking lot.
Have any?
So are we not going to have any It sounded like you had questions or discussion or something.
I did have a question. So looking at it now, I see that cigarette and liquor taxes are a separate line.
What page?
So the state revenue sharing, that is not gas tax? That's something else? That's not marijuana tax?
Right, no.
No, okay.
State shared revenue is just a share of general state revenues that we're eligible for and that we're required to have this hearing for. The other state shared revenues, the cigarette tax, the liquor tax, the state gas tax, those all fall under a different ordinance that we are eligible for, and you guys will pass a resolution at council that because we provide certain services, we are eligible to receive and we would like to receive them. And there's hearings at the council level for those.
Does that also cover our portion of the marijuana tax?
Those I don't believe are covered under these hearing laws.
Okay.
Those are eligible based on other requirements that were set up when those were established.
So do we need a motion to yes, we want your money, state of Oregon? I mean.
No, we're done.
We're done?
So here you're just doing the public hearings. You will make motions at the, when you approve the budget and stuff and then adopted at the council level.
Done for now.
Okay, so.
Do we need to vote on these things?
Right, so the next thing on the agenda is the parking lot. So the first thing that we had on the parking lot list is to calculate the average miles per gallon of 3 categories. It's my understanding that this is a prospective request. And so it won't be brought back next week, but it will be included in the metrics going forward.
So you need an official motion?
Yeah.
Okay, I would move that we have the report on miles per gallon for the fleet broken out into 3 categories: police, heavy equipment, and light duty vehicles.
Second.
Going forward.
Going forward.
Going forward.
Any discussion?
So by going forward, you mean when? Next,
We won't get it. I mean,
yeah, it's not going to happen anytime
No,
soon.
I think that this is going to be probably going into any budget adjustments that we may ask, and it would be in next biennium's budget as to what we've done proactively, or retroactively, I guess, at that point. There's also a discussion that we are routinely bringing up fleet items, so as we make policy decisions, you could also call the data at that time.
It's just to get the data starting to be coalesced.
Right. No, I agree with getting the data. I just didn't know if you were expecting it was going to be provided in a month or a week.
They don't have it going backwards anyway, so.
Right, okay.
So we have a motion that's been moved and seconded to have average miles per gallon for the 3 categories: heavy machinery, police department, and light. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
So the second item is to bring back information related to bank charge fees, credit cards versus checking accounts. I believe that the city manager wanted to do some additional research and bring it back to you next week.
Yeah, so this would not be an in-depth review. This would simply be a discussion with staff to better understand what the different mechanisms may be, working with Encode and our other billing systems, to give you a couple of options if they exist. It may be that we come back to you with, the system we have does not allow for us to amend this in an easy way, and it would be a substantial budget investment, or it would be to change the modular part of the computer system, the software package, which it may be. So we at least would bring you enough information to know where we're at today.
I mean, I think it'd also be interesting to know, like you said, the credit cards are a range, and you know, if there are some higher cards, I mean, I think it's okay to not accept every single kind of credit card out there, you know? We could say we only accept these that have the more reasonable fees, right?
Well, and for donations to the library, that's what we've done. So if it's under $1,000 and you want to make a quick contribution, we'd love for you to go contribute with a card. If it's larger, we actually offer to have someone come pick it up so that we can do a check instead to minimize those fees.
You know, there's that, but there's also just like, is it Amex or whoever has the highest
Amex
fees?
is 5, or
like,
it used to be.
And we can choose
Generally,
not
it's
to
the
accept
highest,
Amex.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, just a couple of things to note. I know back with the North Clackamas County Chamber, we took all credit cards except Amex because the fee was so much more for us that we wouldn't get from that. Interesting that Clackamas County does not accept credit cards for for payments generally. I mean, even our going to the C4 retreat, we have to send a check in. We can't, just do a credit card. Couldn't do our P cards with that, that type of thing. But when you pay your property tax, you can pay it with a credit card if you're willing to pay their service fee that they have. And that's the other thing we used to have in the chamber. There was the fee for the credit card, but like the trips to China and stuff, we would charge a handling fee for that. And we were permitted to do that, but you can't charge other certain kinds of fees or call them certain kinds of things. So we may find that there are some options to where we could do that, and offset those costs a little more. Or we may find, like Clackamas County, that we just don't want to mess with it except for maybe one thing or something. So
I've seen the other places that will restrict on certain types of fees, like SDCs, because those are generally large dollar amounts and it's a percentage of the fee. You're not allowed, they don't accept credit cards. We should definitely include Alma Flores in this discussion, as this, in addition to fees, it's a service that we provide or don't provide to the people who are paying the fees. So those are generally where I get the backlash for policies like this. So there could be, I've seen things where you have limits, any dollar amount over a certain, like over $5,000, we won't accept credit cards, or certain types like SDCs or other fees.
Or we charge a service fee.
Or, yes, you could do the service fee.
You can use a credit card, but you will have to pay the service fee.
Right, and you can charge that. There's ways that have to do some research with the merchant service account to actually charge them directly. Like, so they read it, and if they opt in, that they get charged that, and it never comes through us. And then there's other ways where we've heard suggestions suggestions where it's more of a discount. So if you pay in cash, you get a discount. Otherwise, you pay a higher fee.
Right.
And so then we make it correlate to offset.
So it sounds like there's lots for staff to explore.
There are lots
so
of
I would
options.
move that we
Thank you.
ask staff to explore the options.
Okay.
Second.
Rather than do that work for them right now.
Actually, we're just adding to the work.
Okay.
So it's been moved and seconded to explore the options. I mean, really what you're talking about is anytime money's coming into the city.
Payments are made.
What is the policy with regard to credit cards? Or is it more than credit cards?
I think that it's probably mostly credit cards, but we want to talk about that. I want to see if there's any fees elsewhere.
Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So the CIP review, that was like, we really haven't had an opportunity to review it.
Right. So I believe it looks like some people haven't reviewed the actual document and the thing. So I assumed that this motion meant we'd add it to the agenda and it would be something we could run through. I would just run through the summaries or at least bring them up by department and give you guys an opportunity to ask questions. Does that seem sufficient?
And this was after we went through the rest of,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
At the end of the next
At the
meeting.
end of the next meeting, after we've already reviewed each of the summary. Yeah, okay.
Shift gears.
The only caution that I have is it's 8:30 now, and this is an equally parceled night at the next meeting. So we will probably be out of here closer to 9 or 9:30. If we add this onto the evening, that's fine. If you also still have that extra meeting held, but I would hate to have somebody sit here and then not go. So if we're going to do it, I'd like the motion to also acknowledge we're going to be here late at the next meeting in order to go through this full document. Thanks.
And meanwhile, we can all make sure that we read that as we read the
I would love
sections.
that would be wonderful.
Spent a lot of time on that document.
It was interesting reading those first 18 sections or whatever they were.
You find us interesting. Thank you. Well.
All right, so I move that we do a CIP review at the end of the next meeting.
Second. Moved and seconded to do the CIP review. Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And the last thing on here is the council compensation comparison LOC ask. So I guess the motion is to bring back a staff report or to start that at committee?
I think that we probably could even just bring you a letter that you could all sign on to and ask for LOC to take actions to update their council and mayor salary inventory.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
I
happy
think
to
that
draft
sounds great.
something and just bring it to the next meeting if that's what you want to do.
And it'd be nice if they would capture, salary and the other things, training budgets.
Other benefits.
Other.
Right.
Yeah, but
Training.
it needs
I
to
think
capture everything. That was part of the problem with the last
Yeah.
list. Like Forest Grove, they get health insurance. That wasn't on there.
Right.
Stuff like that. So
Yeah.
we need to know what the total compensation package, as you will.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, like I said, I think there's at least 4, maybe more, or probably more, I'm sure,
So I believe that
answers they would be seeking, I would think.
I believe that there's an existing study. So my guess is that I'll go back and check what's included in there, but I do believe it included it.
It was like 2007 or something.
Yeah.
It's pretty
It was.
old.
Yeah,
The first one we
very old.
got, it was 2007.
So we can see if they can update that document.
Yeah.
Might be
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we need a motion for this?
Yep.
I'll move that that staff bring us forward a letter to request LOC to engage in a council compensation comparison across Oregon.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded for a council compensation comparison resulting in a draft letter to the LLC. Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
We've received several proposed policy changes. Can we set aside some time at the next meeting to talk through some of those?
What policy changes?
Well, the
Quarterly report for one.
that and the Are you talking about Elvis's? The things?
No, the stuff we've been receiving from Haley.
We did
Haley provided an update today.
review them last week. We could add them back to the end of the agenda, if you guys so would like. Because we are asking when you approve it to make a motion to include adopting the policies. So that seems appropriate.
Okay. Is that a motion?
I so move that we spend some time at the next meeting to discuss the proposed policy changes.
Second.
And so we're doing the CIP. We're doing basically what we did tonight. Plus the CIP, plus the sub. Okay. I mean, just want to make sure everyone's on.
The other option would be
We're gonna be here late.
just plan on doing the
fourth meeting.
Fourth meeting.
Which I won't be here for.
I might be out of town as well, so I'll just arrange to have childcare next time.
We have a motion on the floor, but I like the idea of having the follow-up meeting, just going ahead and using it, schedule
It
it.
sounds like we're going to miss at least 3 people.
Yeah.
Oh.
I won't
On
be
that
here.
date.
There's no way.
And that's been part of why we've been trying to pack it into these dates, as we knew recently were made aware that some would miss.
Okay.
So there's a motion and a second.
Remind me again, the motion and the second is on the...
To review the proposed policy changes at the next meeting.
This might also be a good comment that if you come up with questions or have suggested language changes to the proposal, you could provide them in advance so staff could do the appropriate research for the next meeting.
Okay.
All right. With that clarifying discussion, it's been moved and seconded to discuss the policy changes at the next meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Were you going to talk about?
I can. So actually, for the most part, those items that are on that were discussed in my budget presentation. This was just an easier way for people to start visualizing what we're actually achieving with the budget as presented. We'll amend this if we make changes to that budget so that it accurately reflects what is approved by council. Part of what we've struggled with is how do we tell the story a little bit easier to the community about what we're actually doing, because it's a lot. So this was me talking to our graphic design team and asking them to come up with a way to start telling that story.
You know, this city now owns.
But if there are specific questions, if people want to come back at the next meeting, I'm happy to respond. Or you can send me the emails through Haley and through me, and we're happy to put it in writing back to you, any brief updates about what the projects are. I also, just so people know, found the 2006, evidently it was 6, study that LSC did. I'm going to forward that out to the full budget committee just so that everybody has that old study as well. It does go into things like meal stipends and that kind of information. So it will be a significant ask of LSC.
This lots loop sign thing, is that a parking lot item, or how do we?
Actually, that's a great option. If you guys want, we can add that and was there another one? I don't know if you want to take any action on any of Elvis's comments.
I just had a question, actually, that regarded Elvis's comments. Is there anything in the police budget, because I know we're having an upcoming conversation around traffic light cameras or traffic light, whatever that thing is, red light, that. There's also the ones that are like the little speed signs that you can put up in a neighborhood that also take a picture and do that whole thing. Is anything reflected in the budget around that kind of material or?
No, we've actually bought those already, so we have those in-house. We move those around at the request of different NDAs.
But those not the ones that make tickets.
Those don't write tickets.
Oh, you want them for the tickets.
Yeah.
The problem is that we do not legally have the ability to do unmanned tickets. Portland was written out of the law so that they were able to do it in a couple of locations where they had high crash corridors. We were not written out of that law, so there is not a way right now for us to do this without personnel unless we did it as a red light camera. So that was a big part of the ongoing discussion, is that we don't have the option that's been discussed in the paper lately.
Okay.
Which we did. I mean, I talked to LOC last term about, lobbying for all of us, all cities. So, why is ODOT controlling what you can do on your city roads? That's ridiculous. But, and so I think that's something we should continue to lobby for. I mean, that's also the 20 mile per hour speed zones. We can't do that without the state saying we can do it. So, yeah, I mean, that's definitely something we should keep lobbying.
It sounds like we're going to try to finish up the next meeting.
That's what it sounds like.
Then I have an ask for coffee at the next meeting, please.
Okay.
We can make that.
We have to second that.
Warm, we'll bring you a blanket.
Warm.
Maybe we
demonstrate your new, exactly. Demonstrate.
I want Damien to sit here with me all night.
We did ask him to come back so I can ask him if there's like a little bit higher agenda we could set it to.
So we still
did
need.
you want to add Lots Loop or any of the other options?
You said there was going to be an ask about murals, possibly, and art.
There may be. So why don't we put these to the end of the meeting in case there are competing interests? Part of the issue is going to be we have to give to get. So figuring out what we're giving up in terms of projects in order to.
Even if it's 22,000 and that we add to the budget, we've got to take 22,000 out of someplace else.
Correct.
Yeah, right.
We need to find offsets.
Yep.
I'm not sure that's an accurate statement. I mean, you could just have lower ending reserves on your budget, right?
That is totally fair, but that's an offset. So you guys can make a choice to lower the rates of the reserves. It's simply a statement that you guys just have to come to us with how you'd like us to do the payment.
Because what are we projecting for a reserve at the end now?
The reserves always end up higher than we project. I mean, that's just the way it is.
In the general fund, we're 344,000 over our minimum reserve policy, which is the 25%.
So we could take out the 40-something, and it would be...
And still meet our policy.
And still meet our policy, okay. Mm-hmm. And possibly other, if there are other asks that we want to consider.
Pieces to that.
Okay, good.
So I move we discuss the community asks at the end of our next meeting.
Second.
I want to ask for discussion. Everyone wants to go, right? Moved and seconded to deal with the community asks at the end of next meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Final item of business is the approval of meeting minutes for our last two meetings. Take them one at a time, or?
Probably, given the prior discussion.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of the March 19th meeting as amended.
So moved.
Okay. I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Entertain a motion for approval of the meeting of April 30th last week.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the meeting, the first budget committee meeting of April 30th. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Next meeting is scheduled for next Monday, which is
May 14th?
too soon. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.